across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. Just gone 4 o'clock. Thank you so much, Adita. The legend that is Ian Collins back tomorrow in his rightful place. 1 o'clock, we're here. Drive time is on Talk, of course, and you should know by now, the home of free speech and, more importantly, a phrase coined by even Donald Trump in his inauguration. Common sense, ladies and gentlemen. You're allowed to say... Listen, somebody said to me yesterday, what, you can come on Talk and talk about anything? Yes, we're not out to shock. We're not out to be unreasonable. We're out to say, listen, here's a platform for you to discuss things that perhaps other people can't. If you want to be on, loads to cram into the show today. 0344 499 1000 is the only number in town you need. Our Jodie is back. She's just made a startling confession to me, which I will share with you between now and 7. It's a bodily function. 0344 499 1000. Ryan, trouble with the knees, has also upset Sri Lankans. More of that later. You can get him on voice note if you want. The same, that's WhatsApp thingamajig. 0344 499 1000. We have the amazing Sam, the Charlton fan, pushing the buttons. He's a happy man. But most importantly, if you'd like, well, more importantly than Sam, what's more important than Sam? If you'd like to text us, because that's an easy way to contact the show, 87222. Start your message with the word Talks. 3 minutes past 4. Now, one of the things about doing drive time, if I'm being completely straight with you, is that stories tend to break in the afternoon. So we'll go into it, and then you wake up the next morning and people are still talking about it, which we sort of find ourselves in the same position today, because yesterday it was all about the Strategic Defence Review and Starmer standing up and saying, I guarantee, that's not his voice, is it? I guarantee by 2027 it'll be 2.5%. And everybody went, whoa, good. And then he said, and it might be 3% by 2034, but I'm not quite sure. And it all went a bit flaky, and everybody jumped on board and said this should have happened sooner. Quite rightly. Defence has been cut by successive governments for years, and I think, I made my point yesterday on the show, I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think it's been an easy hit, and now it's come back to bite us on the backside. The Tories had their say, nothing from reform. We'll talk about that in just a tick. And then, of course, there was the migrant situation yesterday. Labour, extraordinary. They've been ridiculed for blaming migrant crossings on the weather. 1,200 came across on Saturday and Sunday. Yesterday, probably even more, but today it's raining. You can't base this entire problem on the weather. So all of that, woke up this morning, and it seems to me that that is still at the forefront of people's minds. Add into the mix the BBC licence fee. Don't get me on the British bloated company. They want to charge even more money for something that's not worth watching. But yesterday, after 6 o'clock, the Shadow Defence Minister, Mark Francois, hot-footed it from the House of Commons to this studio and told us the utter chaos that ensued in the House yesterday as the government was announcing this Strategic Defence Review. He's been badgering me all day. You're back. Why are you back today, sir?
Because someone from your very nice organisation asked me to come.
I'm only joking. It's lovely to have you on. Now, this is really interesting. Let's just recap yesterday. You were on the show. You said that the way the government handled the Strategic Defence Review was utter chaos because, and I read this in the papers as well this morning, Lindsay Hoyle, the Speaker, has got this thing, which is true, is that when a government brings in a piece of legislation or makes a decision, you are supposed to put it to the House of Commons first because elected MPs are elected to ask the questions that their constituents would want. But yesterday, utter chaos because it had been released to a select a few journalists, it seems, over the weekend. You also ran back into the Commons and pointed out that it had been told to several people in industry as well before the journalists. Is that right?
Yes. So it's actually the ministerial code,
right,
which is theoretically overseen by the Prime Minister and which all ministers are meant to abide by. It's your ministerial rule book,
yep,
if you like, that says important announcements must be made to Parliament.
But it isn't, yesterday wasn't, and I'm not defending the Labour Party, but it isn't the first time that I've heard this, and actually somebody said to me today, this used to happen. Burko, that nutter, used to scream at the Tories the whole time for not coming in and talking about it.
No, what happened yesterday was genuinely exceptional, and let me explain why. And then let me, if I may, explain why it's really important. They gave this document to selected journalists over the weekend. I mean, you could have read half of this in the Sunday Times.
That's terrible.
Right? So this is before any MPs have got a chance to read it. Then, on the day, they invited I've seen the email now, a bunch of journalists to a reading room in Horse Guards, and it says there'll be refreshments and very good Wi-Fi, you know, will make you very welcome, so that they could read through this hours before any Member of Parliament got it. By the time we got it, we didn't have time to read it before the statement.
Which means you can't prepare a question.
Right, which is clearly what they wanted all along. Then... OK, so that's really bad form, right?
Yep.
Then we found out, in the course of the day, we were contacted, I can't say by who, but we were informed that a number of defence companies were given this, some of them at 8 o'clock in the morning.
And then you think insider trading, which
Well,
is what
the stock market
yeah.
normally opens at 8.
Wow.
Now, to be clear... and for the avoidance of doubt, I'm not alleging on your programme, or indeed anywhere else, that people working for those contractors were involved in insider trading. That's not my point. But we don't know who got it. It is possible that some other people got it, and there were then, you know, if you knew in advance, you know, which bits of kit that they were going to invest in, you know, you could then go and buy
like
shares.
PPE all over again, wouldn't it?
So, my boss, James Cartledge, raised a point of order in the Commons at lunchtime today.
I've got this. So today, your boss, the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartledge, good man, he spoke in the chamber. Let's have a listen. Let's have a look.
Great.
Is that all right?
Yeah, if you got the clip, that's
James Cartledge, let's play it.
In relation to the publication of the Strategic Defence Review hard copy document, I informed you that I was aware that at least 2 major defence companies had been given a copy of that document at 8 a.m. yesterday morning. Now, looking at the market, at 8 a.m. yesterday morning, the share price of one of those companies spiked very sharply at exactly that time. It's very clear, where commercially sensitive material is involved, no copies should be made available to the media before publication, presumably to avoid these sorts of potential effects which come from privileged information not made available to other companies. So, Mr. Speaker, I seek your advice on how to pursue this further, and whether you have heard from the government that they were making any statements or taking any steps to investigate these matters.
Well, I would say it is on the record, and I know that the Shadow Secretary of State won't give up at this reason. I suspect he will be on his way to the Table Office to see what advice he can be given in which to pursue this matter.
Pretty obviously there, yet another example of a government either trying to find a shortcut, not going about it the way the thing... I want to put this to you, because defence has become, quite rightly, in my opinion, I said it to you yesterday, at the forefront of people's minds. It should have happened for years. Your anger with the way the Labour Party have done this is totally understandable.
Yeah, and it's not faux, it's not add water for instant outrage. We're proper furious.
No, I get that, Mark, and we're friends, but I have to say this to you. This is the most animated I have seen, and this is my opinion, a Tory shadow minister or MP in the last 10 months. And I asked you a question yesterday. You didn't. I understand it. I understand, you know, the shadow defence minister. If the passion that you and Cartledge have attached to this, which is absolutely right, could appear in some of your colleagues on a whole raft of other issues, would it not be fair to say the Tories would not be languishing in third place, suffering in the eyes of the public as they are? What you and James Cartledge have done is absolutely spot on. But I made a point yesterday, I'm sure you didn't like it, but where's Cammy Badenoch in all this? Still we hear nothing, and yet you, quite rightly, doing your job and doing it to the best of your ability. It's a relevant comment.
Look,
I know it's difficult for you, but it's true. I had somebody say to me last night, God, he was spot on, but I've heard nothing from her. I know she's your boss, but I think it's relevant to people. They want that. They want the opposition to be holding the government to task.
Well, Jeremy, I've had tougher interviews than someone very kindly saying me and my boss are doing a good job in Parliament. So thank you for that.
It's true.
For the record. Look, you know, Kemi holds Starmer to account every Wednesday at Prime Minister's Questions. She'll do it again tomorrow. Now, everybody can do Prime Minister's Questions better. You know, you go down the pub and it's, I would have asked him this. I mean,
It's not that.
People who think it's easy want to go try it.
No. I'm not. Listen, I'm not saying that that's easy. I am absolutely agreeing with you that this is a point of order that the government have blatantly made a mistake in and they need to be brought to task. What I'm saying is that shines a light to me. I've told you before, ex-Tory voter who turned to Reform. You said yesterday, and I'll put it to Richard Tice later on the show, you said nobody in Reform is there. They don't have a defence spokesman. They don't care. I'm going to put that to Richard Tice later. Hand on
But they
heart.
weren't there again today either.
OK, but my point is... And I
so
will
we were
ask
debating.
you this.
We were debating a thing called the Armed Forces.
I bet you any money, if Reform had been the opposition yesterday, the entire party led by Farage would be battering the Labour government. What I'm saying is that surely you and James Cartledge are actually a mirror at which other people in the Tory party should be looking at and saying to themselves, yes, we've made mistakes and yes, we've apologised. But if we are ever going to get back to a position where the British public want to listen to us more than trust us or vote for us, you have to be vocal like this. That's why I wanted you back, because I think it's excellent. I think you're holding the government to task over something that they have blatantly lied about. And that is surely absolutely the right and the job of Her Majesty's opposition.
Well, I think Mel Stride's done a great job of holding them to account on the economy.
Yep.
I think Priti Patel's done very well of holding them to account on this bonkers Chagos deal. We might come back to that if we've got time. So it's very kind of you to say James and I are pulling our weight, but so are other people in the opposition, to be fair.
Is your boss? Is your boss?
Yes, I think she is, and I think she'll be doing that again tomorrow. But in order to hold them to account, we need information. So what we now need to be really clear about this, we have to get to the bottom of this. We now need to know exactly which companies were given this document at 8 o'clock or 5 o'clock.
Because as you quite rightly say, you turned this round 3 years ago, they'd have been going absolutely barking mad at the Tories.
Again, we need to know which businessmen or women got this about 8 a.m, 5 or 6 hours before members of Parliament got it, and if this quote fell into the wrong hands, if I could put it that way, just as the markets were opening, some people could have made a killing.
Right, listen, what do you think of this? Is this dodgy Labour? Is this the Tories clutching at straws? Mark Francois is here. We're going to talk more about defence in a tick. 0344 499 1000, the only number you need for Talk Drive today. We're here till 7. You can text 87222. Please get those texts in. Questions to Mark, whatever you want to say. We'll do that in the next 10 minutes. The big announcement yesterday, we've talked about the problems and the chaos of how the announcement was made, was that Starmer basically said by 2027 a GDP spending of 2.7% is a guarantee, and then he was flaky and said by 2034 we'll raise it to 3%. Lo and behold, today we read...
Well, he didn't say that.
No, he said...
That's the whole point. He didn't say that.
No, but again, I like this job sometimes, and sometimes I hate it. I made the point to you yesterday, right? Yeah. I don't blame you. I blame 20 years of governments cutting defence, and I'm not sticking up for Starmer. Let's not forget Rishi Sunak only said in the campaign with a week to go, we're going to raise it to 2.5%. The Tories should have said it 10 years ago. I know the world's changed. NATO, explain this to me. Loads of people texting already. NATO will force Britain to spend 3.5% of GDP on defence by 2032. It's understood. Starmer said he had an ambition to reach 3% yesterday at Parliament, but stopped short of a firm commitment. However, at a summit at The Hague later this month, NATO countries will commit to a new target of 3.5%, Mark, plus an additional 1.5% on defence-related infrastructure by 2032. So... here's a question, because when Trump came to power and he jumped up and down and said NATO's not doing enough, and you'll find that I completely agreed with that, right? Why have NATO not been pressurising us before now to pay this? Is this all a direct result of Trump, or is this Russia? Because if this is true, his 2.7%'s out the window, isn't it? He's going to be forced to it.
Right. There's history to this.
OK.
And on this, Trump was right. That at a summit some years ago, NATO nations agreed that they should all spend 2% of GDP on defence. Right. So that became the going rate. At that time, there were only about 4 European NATO members that spent that. We were one, by the way. Yep. We were one. It was under the Conservatives, from memory. So we were hitting the 2. Since then, the world's become more dangerous, and Trump was very robust that others should start. Since he made that fuss under his first presidency, the last time I looked, there were about 23 European NATO members who were spending at least 2. So you could say that Trump got his message across. That would be fair to him, right? NATO can't compel any member to spend anything. They can't legally force them to, but they can. And Trump often uses the analogy: if you're going to be a member of a golf club, you pay the membership fee, right? So, and again, I get that.
I do as well.
Right. So at the moment, so where are we today? We now spend about 2.3% of our GDP on defence, if you include the money that we give to Ukraine to help support them, right? Labour have said they're going to go to 2.5% by 2027, but they won't commit firmly to 3%, which is what you need to afford this. This is written on the basis that you'll spend 3. What's the Conservative Party's position? As the world has become more dangerous, and we've discussed this privately with Kemi, and about 5-6 weeks ago, I could double check it, she changed the party's policy to say we believe we should spend 3% by the end of this Parliament. So in other words...
By 2029.
Correct.
So the Tory policy is 3% by 2029.
Correct. And we made that decision some weeks ago. We didn't do that this morning in reaction to this.
Can I ask you, and this is really important, because one of the things that came out of that Strategic Defence Review yesterday was that the British Armed Forces aren't ready to fight a war against a military with similar capabilities. One of the things that came out of that review yesterday, which for me is frightening, is that they've stripped it bare, 74,000, as a series of governments. And I know it's difficult for you, but this is a really important thing. You're sitting there saying, Kemi Badenoch changed the policy, we're going to spend 3%. Do you believe, although you're the Shadow Defence Minister, in hindsight, great thing and easy to say sitting here, not when you're in politics perhaps, that the cuts to defence over a seriously long number of years actually in hindsight were wrong?
I've always argued for higher defence spending consistently.
You have.
So if I'm going to be consistent, when we were in government, when I was a minister, then when I was on the Defence Select Committee for 7 years, on the committee, which I joined, I think, from memory in 2017, when Dr. Julian Lewis was the chairman, we had a sort of unofficial policy, which was 3 to keep us free. So if, in as much as a select committee can have a policy, our consistent position under a number of different chairmen was that the committee believed we should spend 3%, at least 3% of GDP on defence, and we were all signed up to it as committee members, and we were saying that from 2017.
Do you think now, finally, and defence is your remit, defence is your passion in all your time as the MP for Rayleigh and Wickford?
You're right. And a bit of Europe, but yeah.
Yeah, a bit of Europe, but defence is, the protection of the United Kingdom, I've always thought, is what's important.
The first duty
is it not good, be it Labour, Tory or anybody, right? Is it not good that we are now finally waking up to the threat that the axis of Russia and China and Iran pose, that we are waking up to the realisation that stripping bare our military is not acceptable, and actually the British people, and this is what I want to say to you, you might not know this, but I think it's true, the British people have been spoon-fed we can't afford this for years and we're making cuts. The British people, as we know, are fed up to the back teeth spending £8 billion a year on migrant hotels and £9 billion a year to give away the Chagos Islands, and lots of expenditure that they are now saying, actually, we, public services, but also the defence of this realm is massively important. There is far more awareness about how important defence spending is now than there has ever been, and that's a good thing, isn't it?
I don't know than there has ever been, but certainly than there has been probably since the Berlin Wall came down.
And that's a good thing, right?
Yes, it is. Now, look, what was the reaction to this, right? I've just got the top lines from the editorials of a number of national newspapers from this morning.
Yeah.
The Telegraph said defence review is merely a beginning. The Mail said plan to prepare the UK for war by 2034. The Sun said strategic error because they wouldn't fund it. The Express said spend on defence or the Russians will laugh at us.
Yeah.
The most damning was the Times. Their editorial was entitled Fantasy Forces, and they called this was their
the Times,
a glorified think tank report.
There you go.
Because their whole point was, if you're not going to fund it, it's meaningless, right? So this is the fundamental point. This is a wake-up call, right?
The Strategic Defence Review, if you're listening on the radio.
No, this really talks about the threat, and this talks about what we should do to meet it. And then the government that produced it on the very same day refused to fund it. There's a lot in here about submarines.
We know how they'll fund it, by raising taxes. Well, look, you know that, and I know
Jeremy,
that.
you have to understand, if I may, you have to understand something. Look, this is a government, Jeremy, but not as we know it. Right? It is not actually a government, really. It's a crisis management organisation masquerading as a government. Right? They can't stop the boats landing. They can't fund our defence. They're not dealing with violent crime in this country, and they're just headline chasing one day after another, desperately trying to keep all the plates spinning while they stop us trying to go bankrupt.
Would that be a fair description of the Tories of the last 12 months? And I'm being straight with you. I'm being straight. You didn't stop the boats. You didn't stop the boats. The highest taxation in 70 years.
Right, hang on. Let's take that straight on, right? We had the Rwanda plan. The idea was that it would be a deterrent. Now, we knew that it was beginning to work because, if you recall, the Irish government in Dublin started to complain bitterly that migrants were crossing from Northern Ireland into the Republic to avoid the possibility of being sent to Rwanda. Right?
It was beginning to work, but would it not be fair to say that a more robust approach by the Tories? Hear me out. Why not actually nail it and stop those left-wing lawyers getting people? I mean, I remember that plane. We had it on here. It was sat at the airport and nobody could get on. Do you not feel that the Tories could have made a massive difference in the last election if they stood up and said we're leaving the ECHR?
Well, you know my position on the ECHR, Jeremy. I'm on the record multiple times. Yeah. Okay, so.
Are you in a hurry? Have you got to go anywhere?
No,
right,
I'm good.
I'm being hurried by Ryan, lanky Ryan. I have to go to a break. We're going to continue afterwards. Is that all right?
I'm good if you are. Yeah.
My wife says I'm not. 4:24, we're back in a jiffy.
Well, there is an argument for that. The 4 top countries that receive the asylum seekers who are being run by these gangs from Afghanistan, Iran and Iraq and Somalia actually are Italy, Germany, France and the UK. And as you saw with the riots in Paris over the weekend as a result of that, You're already seeing in Paris nearly 30...
Anna, who is the Southport killer, what he has done, big story in front of the Sun yesterday, I'm sure you saw it, in regard to the privileges that he still has. He can buy Maltesers and various things. There can't be a governor who says to him, has a process, looks at the evidence and says, right, your privileges are being taken away, until the end of a police investigation.
Astonishing. If I was the prisons minister, that would be changed immediately with the stroke of a pen. I've never heard such woke, soft nonsense.
Let's give those brave men and women who are in our jails the tools they need to do their job and feel safe. Let's give them baton rounds, tasers, high neck...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 4:27. We're live across the UK. Tuesday afternoon's drive. JK at the controls. Well, I'm not, Sam is. 0344 419 1000 is the telephone number. Text 87222. We're here with Mark Francois, Shadow Defence Minister. Was on the show yesterday, came back in today talking about the chaotic approach of this government to this strategic defence review. It was released to journalists, ladies and gentlemen, and some defence contracting businesses before MPs had a chance. There's a whole thing going on. Loads of people responding to you being here. We're talking about GDP and how a matter of weeks ago Kemi Badenoch made the decision that the Tories' policy now is 3% by the end of this Parliament, right?
Yes. So 2029 at the latest.
Grant Fleming says if Kemi changed the policy to 3% weeks ago, then how are they going to fund it? It's all well and good to sit there, but how are the Tory, if they got into power, how are they going to guarantee 3%? Because they didn't do it before.
Right, one, by, keeping in check welfare spending. So as an example, Starmer, because he's now terribly suffering in the polls, he's playing to his Labour backbenchers. He says he might get rid of the two-child benefit cap. That is billions if you do that. We are opposed to that. We think we should keep it where it is. Most members of the public support that, because they don't think people should endlessly be able to expand their family and be subsidised to do that by the taxpayer. So by being stricter about that, that saves you billions you can give to defence. We would take part of that money from the foreign aid budget.
Good.
Right? And the other thing we'd do is we'd not give 30 billion quid of British taxpayers' money to Mauritius to rent back a strategic base that we own in the first place.
Do you know, I'm really surprised about the Chagos Islands. Oh, it says,
you're surprised?
Well, the thing that I got, I'm quite surprised that Trump didn't jump up and down. I thought he'd block it. I'm amazed.
Well, I suspect that what happened is that they went to him and said, this is a deal. You can get to use the runway. We'll pay for it. It won't cost you a penny. And he went...
So it's honestly, we've given the Chagos Islands back to the Mauritians.
No, we haven't given them back to them. They never had them in the first place.
All right, but we've given them, and we've given them £9 billion.
Right.
Well, how does that work?
Right, let me explain. I mean, to my mind, it's bonkers. This is the equivalent, if you like, of giving Argentina £30 billion to rent back the Falkland Islands.
Malvinas.
Now, Starmer said the cost of this agreement, which is meant to last a minimum of 99 years, was 3.4 billion, right? That's not true, because the agreement, we now have the treaty, has an inflation clause. So depending on what the rate of inflation is, it goes up every year.
But layman's terms, why is he giving it? Why is he giving it away?
Just
doesn't make any sense.
Let me explain the 30 billion, and then we'll come back to. But it's important to get to the meat of it. If inflation is about 2%, over the duration of the deal, you end up with a round number of £30 billion,
right?
Not 3.4 billion. Now, my boss has written, I think it was to the Office of National Statistics, and asked them to check the Prime Minister's maths. We're waiting for a reply.
It's extraordinary. You'll love this. Before Mark goes on, can you tell him his old section commander, Corporal Fender, says a big hi? Mark Fender.
You're kidding.
Not at all. Jeremy, before Mark goes on, as you know he does, can you tell him his old section commander, Corporal Fender, says a big hello? They are?
Corporal Fenner, he was in my platoon.
Well, there you are. He's listening. I've got
one company, 5 Royal Anglian.
There you are.
He's one of my corporals.
There you are, Mark Fender.
Corporal Fenner, it's great to hear from you.
Yeah, there you go, see?
That's amazing.
There you see.
Well...
Somebody's listening to you.
All right, look. So now, why is he doing it? I'll tell you why he's doing it. He's a human rights lawyer, first and last.
Yeah.
One of his best friends is Lord Hermer, much in the news. By the way, Robert Jenrick's done it. You talk about opposition. He's done a brilliant video about Lord Hermer. Just go and look at it online, right? He's a human rights...
This is the Attorney General, ladies and gentlemen, who thinks it's all right to leave Lucy Connolly, the mother who heard he words 31 months in a prison cell.
So he has been arguing for this. Philippe Sands, KC, also a personal friend of the Prime Minister going back some years, they're all legal mates, has been the legal representative of the Mauritian government in London for about a decade, in fact, a bit longer, I think.
Jobs for the boys, isn't it?
No, but look, let me explain. In these people's world, in their mindset, the Human Rights Act, which gives effect in British law to the European Convention on Human Rights, it's sacrosanct. It's like Holy Writ. And nothing can override that religious belief. It's almost like a cult. It's an absolute act of religious legal belief. And so what the Mauritians have done very cleverly is they've managed to persuade Starmer that because of human rights, he has to do this deal because there's a legal risk to the security of those islands. There isn't. And we have been asking, you talk about opposition, we've been asking the government in Parliament for months to tell us exactly what the legal risk is, and they won't tell us.
Listen, can I just say very quickly, Chloe in Hampshire, can you thank Mark Francois for his clarity? Plain speaking can never be wrong, and Mark's always clear and concise. He should... Yeah, I agree with you. Rachel says, like you, I'm an ex-Tory voter, now reform. I feel for Tories like Mark. I like him, I've heard him on the show several times. But sorry, I won't be voting for them. Alison says, can you ask Mark why his party do not do enough urgent questions? Labour did them often and made his party attend. Why don't you?
Well, we got 2 urgent questions yesterday, didn't we? We got one on the leaking of the documents.
Yeah.
And then there was another one, to be fair, from the chairman of the Defence Committee. That wasn't from us. A Labour MP called Tan Desai, about, this story in the Sunday Times about nuclear weapons, right? We got an urgent question today. My colleague Victoria Atkins, who's the Shadow DEFRA Secretary, got an urgent question about water companies and the threat to Thames Water. So, yeah, we put them in all the time. It is entirely in the gift of Mr. Speaker whether or not to grant them.
If he's there or not on holiday.
But I won't say we put one in every day,
okay,
but we put one in most
Final
days.
question is to do with migration. I think it's a really interesting one. I want to put it to you. And I have to say, I'm sort of with Jane on this, and I'm going to be watching your face of reaction. She says, to Mark, in my mind, the mistake the Tories made with Rwanda was they did not push it through sooner. It was started just before the Christmas recess in 2023. They should have made sure it was done before they left Parliament, and when they got back in January, they could have started the next stage. They delayed it and delayed it, knowing that Labour would scrap it, and lost the momentum, and that was one of the reasons that they lost the election. You could have been more robust and quicker on Rwanda, couldn't you? I think that's a perfectly justifiable criticism from Jane.
I agree. We should have done it quicker.
Yep.
And you may remember there were debates in Parliament. I and some others wanted the bill to be tougher. We wanted it to be more legally watertight. In the end, though, we did get an act onto the statute book. It is true, we ran out of road, right? If Sunak hadn't have called the election when he did, and that's maybe a debate for another day, if we'd waited till the autumn, I think the legislation would have kicked in. So, yes, should we have done it quicker? Your caller is right. We should have done. Should we have made it more robust? Yes, I believe we should have done. But we know that it was beginning to work, again, because we had this example of migrants going from Northern Ireland to the Republic. So word was getting round that, the game was
too
up.
Late though, right?
Well, we should have done it faster. Yeah, so my ultimate answer to your caller's question is yes. But
No,
it's one. But hang on, it's one more plan than Labour have got. They haven't got any plan at all.
I started this.
They're reduced to blaming the weather.
No, I saw this. Yeah, it's the weather. They'll be having a good day today because it's peeing down. Can I just say, and I mean, it's been a real pleasure the last 2 days. You are, in my mind, and I said this to your fair, I say on air with friends, you are a conviction politician. I don't have to agree with everything that you say, and I'm sure vice versa. But what you bring to the table is what I call for every single day. I don't care about your politics. People in this country want leadership. They want vocalising the things that matter to them. And that's what you've done. And you should be holding the government to account. That's absolutely spot on. We thank you for your time. Will you be back next week?
Well, that depends whether or not you're kind enough to ask me. But in the meantime,
yes,
at the risk of hammering the nail to split the wood, we must have the list of companies that were given this at 8 a.m. yesterday.
Insider trading. Can you imagine the Labour Party would have gone nuts with the Tories? Mark Francois, thank you so much indeed. He's the shadow defence minister in the Commons, and he says, and I quote, I'm going to hold that damn government to task. What do you make of it all, my friends? 0344 419 1000, text to 87222. We're on fire. It's drive time.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Just remember, my friends, I am nothing more at nearly 60 than the fluffer for Kev O'Sullivan. Back tonight from 7 o'clock with his... Is it a political... I think it's just a bloody asylum. 20 to 5, we're live across the UK. If you want to be on, Judy, who today said, I can't... even I can't broadcast this, but I'll give you as much as I can. I said, do you know, one of these days I might just stand for Parliament? And she said, I would campaign for you and I would come out on the doorsteps and I would... I would do everything I could to get people to vote for you. I would actually show people the talents that I've got. 0344. When you ring, ask her what she meant. 0344 419 1000. You could not fail to win a seat if Jodie was with you on the campaign trail. 0344. Nice. 419 1000 is the telephone number. Text to 87222. We'll head south to Exeter. Great racecourse at Exeter. Won our winner there. What's David? David, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. Listen, well done for putting defence front and square of the agenda. This is speaking from somebody that's lobbied against defence cuts, predominantly through Conservative governments for over 10, 15 years now. So the current review, really, I think, Jeremy, we've got to look at it in a coherent, you know, if Starmer's saying he wants to nudge the country onto a war footing, then his bumper sticker review needs to be funded. And his timescale really isn't coherent with the problem we've got now. So he's no good saying we're going to do something in 2030. You need to be doing something in the next 30 minutes not in years.
Couldn't agree more. I think the problem with Starmer is, and I think the reason that people are cynical is because I think Mark Francois, very honest, this is admitted to the shortfallings of the Tories. Excuse me, choking slightly. But the problem with Starmer is you get the feeling that he is not, and I keep going back to it on this show, not a conviction politician. He's a reactive politician, and it's all focus group led. And what should I be doing today to almost, you know, touch the points that people want to talk about, rather than that actually being what he genuinely believes in? Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do entirely. I think really Dominic Cummings has summed this up quite well, but I can come at it from another perspective. A lot of the senior officers, sort of Admiral, General, Head of Service level that I've liaised with over the years to try and push back against this ridiculous, you know, looking at it and doing nothing. I mean, I sat next to General Sir Richard Barrons, who's on the review now, in 2018 at Defence Committee with when Dr. Julian Lewis was there, and Francois was sitting on committee as well, and he told everyone in no uncertain terms there were reams of analysis in the MOD in 2018 that were going back years, saying we were in a different climate with Russia and we needed to adapt and get a grip with what we were doing in defence, because a lot of the stuff we'd got was really, really in terms of capability, it was Cold War orientated. Yep. And of course, Ukraine has turned that completely on its head. We're dealing with a completely different way of fighting.
But I get that. Let me ask you one thing, because I want to move on, not in a disrespectful way, because I think most people are agreeing. To me, and I said it to Mark, there's been far too much cut to the defence budget for years, and I've listened to the argument about, the Cold War. To me, it was an easy target, and it's come back and bitten us on the backside. I find it quite rich that the Tories are suddenly going, we're going to spend 3% by 2029. They cut it willingly, almost
massively.
Almost without even thought. Theresa May, David Cameron, Boris, they all did it. It was an easy target. Yes, the world has changed. For me, the most important thing is that we are finally now admitting, right, that we have to defend our nation, which is really important. The problem is, and I'm going to put one caller on very quickly, despite the fact, Ryan, because this next caller says this is just the only way you can do this is taxes. Quickly, let's go to Salford and Alan. 30 seconds. What you got, Al?
Oh, yeah, thanks. Not a lot, Jeremy, but yeah, this is just a load of nonsense. I think they got in the Treasury and they thought, we can't balance the books. So let's put it onto defence, as though the Russians are coming every 5 minutes. What a load of nonsense. We've got 10 million illegal immigrants in this country. It's about time we cleared them out of the country and then think about defence. We've no defence in this country.
But, I mean, I gave a figure yesterday, my friend. I gave a figure yesterday which shocked everybody. Since 2018, hear me out, since 2018, 150,000 illegal migrants have come to the United Kingdom. We've only got 74,000 in our bloody armed forces.
Exactly, but it's all smoke up your jacksie, I'm afraid.
There's a thought. Smoke up your jacksie from Salford. Spent many a year filming there. 5:15, live across the UK. He's been waiting for 4 days, 3 hours and 15 minutes, but he's finally on. A very good afternoon to the legendary Conservative commentator, Benedict Spence. How are you, dear boy?
I'm well, thanks. It wasn't a problem to wait that long. It's how long it takes to dial up my internet from out here. So it was all fine.
Where are you? Somewhere in the country, in the Pile? Are you in the Norfolk Pile? Are you, Spence? Is all well. I still believe that the greatest. I've been here 3 years. The greatest link ever was when you and I were on air. And suddenly the smoke poured out of whatever chapel it was, and the new Pope was announced, and somebody whispered in my ear, "We've got our own Pope. Benedict Spence is with us." How are you, my friend? So much to talk about. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with this? Did you hear what Francois was going on about how they released this information to journalists and apparently some companies, and there could be insider trading? Is this the Tories clutching at straws, or have they got a point, Benedict?
I mean, everything that the Tories currently do is clutching at straws because they are in 3rd place, a distant 3rd place, if not in 4th, and have sadly become a bit of an irrelevance. A lot of them are talking good sense now that they are not even really in opposition, and it's very sort of disheartening to hear people like Mark Francois or Robert Jenrick coming out with things. And all of those voters, those millions of voters are sat there going, fantastic. Well, you could have averted this if you hadn't, whilst you were in government, not done any of this, and then had an argument with yourselves about how maybe you need a period of in opposition to sort yourselves out. I think it's one thing to hear these things and go, well, that sounds like a lot of sense. But there was a very long period of time in which the Conservatives could have done an awful lot about these things and didn't. So thanks for that, but we're not really too interested. Not that necessarily reform will do any better, but the Tories have had their chance, frankly.
What did you make yesterday of this strategic defence review? So up jumped Starmer, 2.5% by 2027. And then he got a bit flaky when he sort of said 3% by 2034. Today we discovered that NATO will force Britain, you must help me out with this, will force Britain to spend 3.5% of GDP on defence by 2032. At a summit in The Hague later this month, NATO countries will commit to a new target of 3.5% plus an additional 1.5% on defence-related infrastructure by 2032. I put this to Mark Franster. I'm not sure what he thought. This is a direct result of Donald Trump telling NATO he's not going to spend lots of money when they're not, isn't it?
It's partly a result of that, yes. And this has been coming for a very long time, and it's pointless to listen to European countries saying, oh, this is outrageous, this is X, Y, Z, because, as I just said, he was talking about this in his first presidency.
Yeah.
We're talking 8 years ago now, almost a decade. This has been in the pipeline, and countries have not prepared for this. A war has subsequently broken out in Europe. Again, European countries have not actually prepared for this. There is a reason why a lot of them are very reluctant to do so, and that is because ultimately a lot of the equipment that they will be buying will be being bought from the United States. Now, I know that there is this European Defence Fund that we've just traded a load of fishing rights to get access to, and it's not even really a fund, it's all loans. But that, again, that's not really the main amount of money. That's small fry compared to what is going to end up going to American arms manufacturers. And that is considered, frankly, a one-sided deal, a pretty asymmetrical deal, in that the US is sitting there saying, you Europeans have to spend money on defense. And it happens that our companies who subsidize are the ones that benefit from that. There is also the other adding, which is that Katja, who is the one that's leading a lot of this, Estonian Prime Minister, President, whatever she was, she's very keen because she's former head of a Baltic state. So the Baltic states are terrified about Russia, and they're the ones driving this, partly because of how useless the rest of Europe over Ukraine. The problem is, when you listen to what it is that people in Chicago say we need to spend on, it's equipment from 20 years ago. They're really, really big on the area of things called tanks, which...
Drones, not tanks.
I know lots of people quite like tanks. They're big and they're sort of flashy and they look as if they do a lot of damage. But the lesson that we've learned from Ukraine is that tanks can be blown up, really expensive tanks, by very cheap drones.
Absolutely.
Drones change the dynamics when it comes to modern warfare. And that's actually why I'm quite skeptical about talking about 3.5% of GDP, 3%. What is that money going to go on? Actually, what we're seeing now is that you can mount a plausible defense for a lot less money than you used to be able to. It doesn't need to be high-tech, state-of-the-art stuff that ends up massively over budget, massively late, and can be blown up by a drone.
We're going to go to a break, and then we've got some other stuff to talk about. But just quickly, are you, though, like me, same sort of stock, I imagine, you and I, it's good, is it not, after 20 years of cuts, mostly by the Tories, but by almost every single government, the easy targeted defence? It is good, finally, that somebody's got their head out their backside and gone, we need to defend this nation. We need to, whether it's done properly or not, and the technique, the warfare stuff that needs to be dealt with. But truthfully, is it not a good moment that we're actually finally saying, actually, defence is massively important to the United Kingdom?
Yeah, 3 very quick points. A, it is very good that we're doing this. It is long overdue. B, the MOD is a money-burning pit. It is woefully inefficient. And as much as we can talk about spending more money, we're talking about something that is even less efficient than the NHS.
Wow.
To be completely honest, that needs to be addressed. And then the third thing is, what is the point of spending money on nuclear weapons, on tanks, on planes, when, as your previous caller pointed out, the number one thing about national security is a secure border? And we don't have that.
Completely. 10 to 5. Benedict's going nowhere. You're going to go and do... I'm going for a wee. I'm back in 3. Don't go anywhere.
Greta's journey as well, it's just so cliched, isn't it? I mean, she's gone from the annoying little truant to lecturing people at the UN about climate, and now she's a pro-Palestinian Gaza flag waver. And it just shows you just how vacuous all of that nonsense is. You know, it's the protest for protest's sake. What does she even actually know about any of this? She's a rent-a-crowd, rent-a-gob, bandwagon jumping, irritating little twerp.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back 6 minutes to 5 with Benedict Spencer, Conservative commentator. I'm moving on from defence. I mean, we've done that. There's a couple of other things, Benedict. Labour blames blames the weather for migrant crossings, says that because the weather's been nice. But what's really interesting is, this is the Home Office, this is Labour's Home Office, it also intimates that the figures also showed migrant arrivals were far lower when the Tory ministers were poised to finally launch Rwanda removal flights last year. I wasn't a fan of Rwanda, let's be perfectly honest, I don't know if you were, but the truth of the matter is, even the Labour Party's Home Office is now saying that was being seen as a deterrent. And now this government is saying maybe we should process offshore. The truth is they haven't got any plan at all, have they?
No, they don't. And again, this is very funny, given that the Labour Party previously said that it had broken the link between the weather and migration, or that it was going to be able to get this migration down regardless of the weather. That hasn't turned out to be the case. And again, it's hilarious, isn't it, that this climate crisis we're constantly being told about is fueling more people coming. That'll be the next thing, won't it? That these people are all fleeing the climate and they just so happen to come over on a sunny day. Look, this is one of those things where I agree. Rwanda in particular didn't sit particularly well with me. It struck me as a bad deal. The numbers involved weren't enough. It seemed like an awful lot of money, but it was a form of deterrence. The key thing isn't so much about sending people to, I don't know, some sub-Saharan African country or something like that. It's about telling them they're never going to reach the British mainland. And if they do, they're going to be arrested and taken somewhere that is not the British mainland. One of the things that is quite good, or used to be quite good, until we started giving these things away or paying people to take them away, is that Britain used to have, and still does have a few, overseas territories and islands and things like that.
Falkland Islands, ladies and gentlemen, that's where I put them.
Yeah, St. Helena, South Georgia, if you really don't like people. There are lots of places that you can, in fact, take people that are not the British mainland, that we do have jurisdiction.
Which will be better than a war-torn country, because you know I've been up, you're bored of this, but it's true. I cannot... those lefty activists will not answer this question. These men leave their wives and children with bombs raining on their heads. They don't like the tent in France. They get a hotel, they get a credit card, a mobile phone, a Pilates lesson, a driving lesson, and probably I don't know what else they get. And the people of Britain are going, but we're getting nothing of that. And that's the point. Every single day we say this, but it's true.
It is, and there's also the fact that a lot of these people aren't even fleeing war-torn countries. I mean, a lot of these people come from India. There's no point in getting around this. A lot of them are illegal migrants coming for economic reasons from India who simply don't want to come the legal way because it's more advantageous for them to do it a different way because they know they wouldn't get in if they tried to come the legal way. Although maybe somebody should tell them about the Boris wave. It's never been easier to get in the legal way. But the point is, it's about a deterrent. And okay, fine, maybe Rwanda wasn't the one, but you need something in place. And this goes back, I know we've moved on from defence, but it's such a basic thing. If you don't have a border that is enforced, and if people's first act as they come to the country is to break the law, I'm sorry, what kind of precedent does that set? What are you saying to Russia and Iran and China and other countries who would be sitting there thinking all of these really complex spy rings and efforts to recruit people that we've had to put in place? Why did we bother? We can literally just put people on a boat and send them over the channel, and they'll be given free accommodation. They won't be found out. That is the level of incompetence.
Do you think, just very quickly, do you think? I mean, I didn't say this to Mark Francois. He was going on about reform. There was nobody in the house when we talk about defence. Reform has grabbed the narrative. I know you're slightly cynical. There are other people who say that they are going to be the next government, blah, blah, blah. They are speaking about the things that matter to people, and you've just said it there. It is absolutely barking mad to think that you can get into this country when you are not escaping a war-torn country without your wife and child, drop your passport in the sea, disappear into our society, and actually be treated better than people who have paid into a system for many, many years and are being left behind. That cannot, to any politician, make sense, man.
I still am not convinced that reform will do a better job, but what I would say is I am very much now of the opinion, where things currently stand, that reform will be the largest party at the next general election unless something changes.
Shall I tell you why I think they will be? Because I think the British public are sick and tired. I think they've seen A and B and B and A and A and B, and they've gone, do you know what? They might not be experienced. They might be a bit rough around the edges. They might make mistakes, but it couldn't actually be worse than the shower whatever we've had for the last however long.
I completely agree with that, and I think that when you are at a position now where both established parties are sinking like stones and their arguments aren't cutting through, I think Farage has got possibly the easiest job in history. All he has to do is just avoid any internal fights and scandals any more than he's already had. Yeah, I think he's, he might get like a cat 9 of them, and he's already had 1 with Rupert Lowe, maybe 2 with Ben Habib. Let's see how many more he gets away with. But for the time being, he just has to keep.
But I think what it is I very quickly got a minute. He's a conviction politician. It's a bit like Trump. You can disagree with his conviction, but you can look at him and go, at least at least he's got an opinion. It's not, the focus group have told him to fart this morning, or they've accused him of that. He just does, and he says it with a pint of beer in his hand, and people go, there's a proper man.
Yeah, for the time being. I mean, it's entirely possible that he might end up moving to the centre if he gets worried. And what might be interesting is the only person that I see actually challenging him right now is Robert Jenrick. And I don't necessarily trust Robert Jenrick for just putting it out there. I think it's interesting, his political direction that he's gone in. But right now, he is the only one that has any sort of national presence that is speaking the same language as Nigel Farage. I think if the Tories were to make him Tory leader, then I think you'd have a really interesting fight out on your hands. And it would be interesting to see how Farage responded to that. But for the time being, he's not leader, so it's not relevant.
You're a legend, Benedict. Sorry to keep you waiting so long. Always great to have you on. Benedict Spence there on Talk Drive. 0344 499 1000. News at 5, and Isabel Oakshott is next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, my friends. Welcome to Hour 2 of Drive for Tuesday. We're live across the United Kingdom on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. And this is your show. I've said it again and again. Whatever you want to talk about. We've done a lot about defence. We're going to talk next about the BBC, who think it's OK, again, to increase the licence fee. What a bunch of... I can't use that word, Rana, get me. Labour says, we know why. Well, actually, probably it isn't the way that... Who's the woman? Mrs Balls? Yeah, she doesn't sound like that. But anyway, they've blamed the weather for migrant crossings. It's sunny. That's why all these people are flooding into this country. We'll talk about that. And blasphemy law warnings from Cami Badenoch. She put her head above the parapet. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a long 3 weeks since I spoke to, frankly, the love of my life, Isabel Oakeshott. Good afternoon.
Where have you actually been? I mean, you have been away so long that I've almost forgotten what you look like.
I'm here. Look at this tan.
Where have you been? Does history tell us where you've been?
I can't say where I've been, but I wasn't with you, was I? Unlike other people. I mean, it's all right for some. I went to Butlins and did a summer season. I'm actually a redcoat trying to make some money on the side.
Yeah, about that. Well, you know, things have moved on since you've been away. Yeah, you know, all sorts can happen.
Just a bit. Now, I don't want to talk about defence with you. I want to talk about something that I think is really, really important. Cami Badenoch warned last night of the impact of creeping blasphemy laws after the conviction of a protester. This is a really interesting story. He'd set fire to a copy of the Quran. Hamit Koskan, 50, shouted an obscenity about Islam. He said it's a religion of terrorism and I'm going to burn the Quran, whilst holding up a flaming copy of the holy text. He was protesting last year against the Turkish government. He was ordered to pay £240 in cost and a surcharge. He was found guilty, Isabel, of a public order offence motivated by hostility towards members of a religious group, namely followers of Islam. Last night, Badenoch said the case should go to appeal, and a coalition of politicians and free speech campaigners accused the courts of reviving blasphemy laws via the back door and suppressing free speech. There is seemingly one rule for one in this country and one rule for the other, isn't there, Isabel Oakeshott?
Well, I don't like Quran burning.
Nope.
I wouldn't particularly like to see someone burning the Bible outside a church, or saying, you know, horrible things about Christians. But I wouldn't, if someone took a Bible and stood outside Westminster Abbey and burnt it, I would be pretty upset, but I wouldn't say that they should be prosecuted under some kind of blasphemy law. I would just say, you know, what the hell has our society come to, that people are going around burning religious texts outside in public places? So I am concerned about this, and I think this government has got an awful lot to demonstrate that it doesn't want to preside over new restrictions on freedom of speech and our liberty to do stuff. I mean, blasphemy laws went out, I think, hundreds of years ago. So it's a bit of a retrograde step to reintroduce them.
But it's also the thing for me, and I'll probably get this wrong, so forgive me, but the thing that worries me about this, and we've talked about two-tier politics, we've talked about two-tier policing, we've talked about two-tier justice. Let's talk about the case of Lucy Connolly, that mother of the young baby who was given 31 months in jail. And it turns out this Attorney General, a friend of Starmer's, Lord Hermer, I think it is, who's under real pressure, was one of the main advocates for her going to jail. I do not in any way condone what she said about the Muslim community. I do not in any way condone Hamet Kusan burning the Quran. But it does strike me that this bloody government makes more of an example of people who are criticising certain religions than they do of other people. And there's the concern that Lucy Connolly, yes, they were wrong words. It was up for 3 hours, it was viewed 310 times, but she's languishing in jail, and yet there are people committing heinous crimes using human rights laws and getting away with all sorts of things. It's dual standards, isn't it, Isabel?
Oh, 100% it is dual standards. I mean, the Lucy Connolly case, I know we talk about it nearly every day.
So we should.
On this station, and I'm never going to tire of talking about this case, because as long as that poor woman is in jail, you know, there is a gross miscarriage of justice going on. I don't really care about her tweet. It was just a tweet. Nobody was actually harmed as a result of her tweet. She said stupid words. They were horrible words. I wouldn't have dreamed of saying anything like that. I wouldn't even think something like that. But in the heat of the moment, it was a rush of blood to the head, and she said something stupid. She regretted it. On what planet is it fair for her to be in jail for literally months on end, and she is actually technically facing a years on end sentence, when there are people who have done terrible things with obvious demonstrable victims, you know, rapists, for example, child abusers, who are getting far shorter sentences, and in many cases not custodial sentences at all. And I think that our listeners feel so powerfully that something is wrong and rotten at the heart of our justice system, because there are far too many decisions being made that don't stack up with the other decisions. So you've got, for example, Hugh Edwards, a person in a position of massive public influence, somebody who has a following and yet never went to jail as a result of collecting...
No, let's note it. That paedophile's walking the streets of Great Britain on a BBC bleeding pension, for God's sake, and she's in jail for some words. I would have thought she was... In my mind about Lucy Connolly, she would have been the perfect example of somebody who should have been done community service within the Muslim community, learning about the good things that the Muslim community have. There's many Muslims who are appalled by what's going on, but that's not going to be achieved by throwing her in jail, because people will just jump up and say, this is pro-Muslim and anti-this, and it causes more... To me, that sums up Starmer's government absolutely. It's the whole... It looks better to do that. The focus group said, let's go for those people. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't.
I think what you're about to say, but maybe anyway, I'll just say it, is that I think that the case of Lucy Connolly actually creates more division in our society. It breeds more resentment, therefore it's counterproductive. And if I can just go on for 1 second more about Hugh Edwards, the difference is that Hugh Edwards has a following. Lucy Connolly, respectfully, was actually a nobody until this government did things that are likely to turn her into a bit of a cause célèbre. You know, she is now effectively a rather strange martyr to a really important cause, which is the freedom to say stupid things, especially if you actually delete them quickly afterwards. She had no following. No one was going to take to the streets, man the barricades, because some random woman called Lucy Connolly had had a bit of a rush of blood to the head. Yeah. And there are plenty of people who will look at Hugh Edwards and say, plenty of people with dark minds and darker habits will look at what's happened to Hugh Edwards and say, well, you know, if a massive BBC star can get away with collating and collecting disgusting, obscene images of child pornography, well, you know, I'm a no one, surely I'll get away with it too.
I could not agree with you anymore. And while we're on it, let's move to the next thing, which is the BBC, because not every time we speak, but almost every month, this raises its ugly head. The BBC Director General, Tim Davie, has called for a higher licence fee after taking aim at a decade of grinding cuts. He said he was open to reform of the fee and its enforcement, but made it clear that he wanted more money from the public to enable investment in the BBC. He said, and I quote, I do want universal funding and I want proper investment and not begrudging, grinding cuts to the BBC. That's what we've had. It's not help. This call for investment, Isabel, amounts to a demand for a higher licence fee, which makes up 2/3 of the BBC's income. They received 3.7 billion quid from us last year, which currently stands at 174. You're laughing because I'm joking. I'm laughing as well. They've got some front. They're absolutely governed by the left. They've got a political agenda. They're supposed to be what? The state broadcaster. You have to pay for crap programming, whereas everybody else has to prove they get listeners by getting advertisers, by surviving. And now they want more. Joke. I mean, I see them as like a kind of yet another flaccid, bloated government department. And you know that the waste in there is colossal. You know, we're coming up to that great annual occasion when the BBC sends, and I'm not making this up, about 200 people to Glastonbury. You know, that is the kind of absolute nonsense that we get from the BBC. And, you know, we need a kind of Doge approach to the BBC. If crack efficient teams went in there
and worked out just where the money is being spent, I think then we could see just the level of waste that there is. And, you know, I also hate the way that they bully people to pay the license.
Yeah,
you know?
I agree.
Such threatening letters from the BBC. I don't have a television. You know, they were pretty much threatening to send round the bailiffs to a property that was empty and under renovation. And, you know, they are so aggressive in the way they chase people. A lot of people these days actually choose not to have a television, choose not to watch the BBC, and therefore do not need to be paying the license.
But as a television person, I suppose, the thing that grates with me, yes, you're absolutely right about the way they treat people and the way that they try and enforce it. In fact, I'm doing up a house, and exactly the same happened to me. I've got a TV licence for the house that I'm in, and they were making all sorts of threats. You just go, well, you're wasting your time, you idiots. There's nobody in there. But I think for me, from a televisual point of view, because I've worked on commercial television and commercial radio for so long, I mean, it sounds basic, but you survive if you get viewers and listeners, then that attracts advertisers to spend money, and that's how the station works. The BBC does not have to be any good. It doesn't have to make anything that it doesn't want to make. It doesn't have to get any viewers or any listeners. And it's lived off its bleeding reputation, which is being distinctly destroyed on a daily basis for years. And the most important thing is, surely a state broadcaster, unless we're living in a dictatorship like Russia and they tell you what we want to hear, this lot have an agenda, and it is politically correct left-wing B-O-double-L stuff. I mean, it is. And you can tell that almost everything, they're also smug and they're also left-wing, and they expect the British public to continue to fund that. It doesn't make sense.
Well, it makes every sense to them, doesn't it? It makes every sense because it's just kind of...
gravy train.
Yeah, and a job for which you don't have to prove very much. And I know I've got a massive issue with things like their BBC Verify, which keeps getting things wrong, and just the whole kind of institutional left-wing bias, which is that whole thing that those woke people call unconscious bias. It's so packed with lefties, they don't even realise.
Can you help me out? Because I've been away and I've missed you. What does unconscious bias mean, mate?
That means that you don't even realise you're being biased. So you might be a kind of good and pure and...
So I could say I hate Ryan, but I wouldn't say it, but I'd actually know that I said it and he'd know that I meant it, yeah? That would be unconscious bias, yeah?
I'm not sure whether Ryan is a good example here. It's kind of like you just don't know that you're against something, but it's sort of so deeply ingrained, and they are so deeply ingrainedly lefty.
Honestly, mate, as I approach 60, I am getting to the point where unconscious bias, I don't even know what that means. The BBC...
Oh, there's way worse than that. There's way worse than that. What about Horn's halo? Have you heard of that? Horn's halo syndrome.
Sorry, Horns? Horns?
Horns, which is probably what you've got. Halo, which is...
Sorry, I haven't got the horn. Are you what did you say? I've got the horn, did you say?
No. The one-track mind is what you've got. So, yeah, there's this thing if you actually went to DEI training, which I'm sure the BBC does a lot of, which is called Horn's halo bias. The NHS is big on this too.
Right.
That's what you instinctively think someone has a halo or someone has horns, and you kind of don't really know. You know, you put people in a group where we basically think, for example, the BBC, they have horns, whereas we at News UK have halos. Horns halo bias.
Honestly, is that true, mate? That's genius. Horns halo bias.
I like to teach you things. You know,
right.
when you.
I'm going to throw this open to my 7 viewers. Right, this is brilliant. Horns halo bias is DEI crap. You think that somebody's got horns because they're aggressive and they're outspoken, but if you halo, you're all sweet, yes? Let's throw it out there. There isn't a prize. We've got no budget. Give me an example, people. 87222. Start your message with the word talk. Who's got horns and who's got a halo? Who's horny and who's halo-esque? 87222. That's brilliant, as Isabel. That's genuinely true. I've never heard of that, mate.
100%. The NHS literally teaches its people about Horn's halo, and they spend a lot of money doing this.
But horns would be somebody that's a bit aggressive or opinionated, like you and me.
Well, horns is probably how most of the NHS see patients. You know, they're frankly an inconvenience, so they've probably got horns. Halos, on the other hand, is how they see themselves. You know, they work for the NHS, so they obviously wear a halo.
Oh, how do you see yourself?
horns all the time.
Good.
Badass. I'm a badass.
You're a badass. You're allowed to say that, but I'm accused of having a one-track mind. We've done the BBC, we've done the blasphemy laws. I would like to point out, yesterday, of course, we had Zia Yusuf on, the chairman of Reform. Really good, interesting chat with him for half an hour. And he was announcing this Doge-style entry into Kent County Council, announced it was Nathaniel Freed. You just made a really good point. Can you imagine if Reform becomes the next government and they send a Doge-style bunch of operatives into the BBC, into the NHS, into Whitehall? Can you imagine the billions of pounds this country could save, Isabel Oakeshott? Seriously.
I really can imagine it, and although it's not a discussion I've ever heard anyone in Reform having about sending, SWAT team into the BBC, I actually think that if there was a legal way of doing that, which there probably is, if you're the actual government, then I think they probably would. I mean, I do know that Reform leadership takes a pretty dim view. The senior figures in Reform are not particularly pro-BBC, so I think that would be high on the hit list.
That'd be very interesting. What do you make of all of this, people? 0344 499 1000. Horns Halo bias is part of DEI training in your life. I don't know, people you know, famous people. Who's got the horn? No, who's got horns and who's got the halo? Ryan's looking completely confused. 87222. Start your message with the word talk. Isabel, to finish, you lovely person, we've got this wrong for a long time. We've sat and done this programme. We've watched the Tories flounder the migration crisis with Rwanda, which didn't really take off because of the ECHR and human rights laws. We've listened to Keir Starmer say that the way to end it is to smash the gangs. Today, Mrs Balls, as I call her, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has said that Labour has finally worked out why we have a migration crisis. She's blamed the weather, Isabel Oakeshott. The weather.
Yeah, and is that why we have an annual NHS crisis as well every winter? Because it gets cold in the winter? It's just exactly the same thing, guys. Every year there's winter and people get flu, and every year there's summer and more migrants come over. And it's as predictable as the seasons. And for Labour to say that it's because of the weather that 1,200 people came over, and, thanks, by the way, to the French who managed to stop a paltry, I think they stopped 178, or was it 78? I don't know.
Is it only me who thinks they're taking the out of us? We're giving them 500 million quid. They are taking the mickey. I don't know whether it's because of Brexit or they just don't like us. They're actively pushing these people to get in boats and come to the United Kingdom. We have to turn these boats around and send them back to France. It is such a joke. It is not people escaping war-torn countries. It is people going, oh, do you know what, in England, you get this, you get that, you get the other. It is the pull factor because we're soft, isn't it?
100% it is, and the French have said that. They've said that we've got to stop rolling out the red carpet for migrants, and maybe not as many of them would want to come our way. And they've also said we've got a, quote, very weak asylum policy, which is true, but what we've also got is very questionable neighbours in the form of the French, who are taking an awful lot of our money and taking us for a ride.
I love having you on this show. Can we finish? Oh, hold on a second. Margaret. She says, J.K. Horns, Starmer, Cooper, Reeves, Halo, Mike Graham, Isabel, and J.K. I think you should be an MP. There you go. No comment. Grace, Horns, the BBC, Halo, talkTV. Christina, Horns, BBC, Labour, Halo, my dog. I'm going to play, if I can, a little game with you, Isabel Oakeshott, or Izzy as I like to call you. Horns, James Whale, Halo, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Simon in West Sussex needs therapy. Politically, Keir Starmer, Horns or Halo? She knows where this is going.
Obviously, Horns.
Kemi Badenoch, Horns or Halo?
She's so invisible that I can't see either on her. Where is she? No sign of horns, no sign of halos. Irrelevant.
Any idea who the next politician I'm going to ask you about is?
Ed Davey.
Richard Tice, Horns or Halo?
Bit of both.
I love it. We love, really, yeah. We love having you on. It's so nice to see you. Thank you very much indeed. It's so good. Isabel Oakeshott, live and exclusive on Talk Drive, 5:22. So that's actually quite good. I didn't even know that. DEI training, that's what diversity, exclusivity and in... apparently in the NHS, there's a thing called horns halo bias. Apparently, if you're horny... if you're horns, you're an angry, miserable sod like me. And if you're a halo, you're a very nice, lovely person who gets it right the whole time. So in our team, OK, Jodie would be halo. Ryan would be horns, I think. Would he? Sam wouldn't give a toss because Charlton got promoted. 0344 499 1000. We're back in 3.
Greta's journey as well, it's just so cliched, isn't it? I mean, she's gone from the annoying little truant to lecturing people at the UN about climate, and now she's a pro-Palestinian Gaza flag waver. And it just shows you just how vacuous all of that nonsense is. You know, it's the protest for protest's sake. What does she even actually know about any of this? She's a rent-a-crowd, rent-a-gob, bandwagon jumping, irritating little twerp.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25, we're live across the UK. I learn something every single day on this show, and today I've learned from Isabel Oakeshott there's a thing called horns halo bias. It's not even made up. This is diversity, exclusivity and inclusivity training, but can I say no, with the NHS. And apparently it then determines what sort of person you are. So if you're grumpy or you have an opinion or you dare to, say, I don't agree with that, you're horns, you're a horrible devil-type person. But if you're just sort of self-important and you do worthy things and you're left-wing, you've got a halo. Steve says, great show. My halo is propped up by my horns. That's a very interesting point. Let's go to Kent. Jack, you're on Talk Drive. Hello.
Oh, hello, Jeremy. Because I think you've got this horns and halo thing slightly wrong, because the halos, they're the people who think that they are virtuous.
Oh.
The people who disagree with them are horns.
Oh, so horns is good?
Yes, I know.
No, I'm asking you. I don't know.
No. It's not. They only exist in the mind of people who think they got halos who think that the horns don't actually exist except in the mind.
Right, so you can have an opinion, but if you break the view of the norm and you, like, say, talk TV, all the do-gooders who think they've got a halo on consider us horny, in effect.
Yes, they think you're horny.
Well, it's a long time since anybody thought I was horny, to be honest. What?
You're not. You're just right.
You're very kind.
They see you as bad.
Well, good. Well, you see, now I understand now. This is what happens. They say to me, why don't you plan this show? If I planned this crap, it wouldn't... Horns and Halo, you're a very kind man. Whereabouts in Kent are you, Jack?
Chatham.
I'm gonna start half a rhyme, but I won't finish it. Tim and I... Do you think you could finish a rhyme with the word Timbuktu, Jack?
Probably not on air, no.
Tim and I went down to Kent and we met 3 women in a tent. There didn't seem a lot to do. Lovely to see you, Jack. Thanks very much indeed. 03444. I'm not filling in the rest. Work it out. 03444 419 1000. Hello to Phil. Great show, Jez. It's quite simple. Horns, Labour, Talk TV and Farage, Halo. Horns, Labour, Talk TV and Farage, Halo. Jez, says Peter Stoon. I cancelled my TV licence, emailed them and said TV is broken. Haven't heard from them. Their Israel bias is through the roof. They disgust me, says Peter in Croydon. Very interesting. Lizzie M. What does the M stand for? Lizzie M. What's wrong with me? When I worked in the NHS, we called them smiling assassins. Oh, jeez. Jane says, if Reform scrapped the licence fee, they wouldn't need Doge. But like one... so the BBC could refund the waste back. Couldn't agree more. Can you imagine if Reform got in and they sent a Doge-style sort of bunch of operatives into the BBC, into the NHS, into Whitehall, 10,000 civil servants? Don't work from home, come into work. It'd save billions, man. Rich says, Jez, the BBC thinks it's on the mark because all of the far left also call the bias and right wing for showing any dissent against their version of reality. They won't change unless they are broken. Interesting. Caroline, well, that makes sense. People are turning off mainstream TV in droves and then expect us to pay them more for something we don't want to watch. They know what they can do with that view. Absolutely. Hello to Terry in Slough. Lovely. I am 76. Good man. And this useless, incompetent, bloody Labour government are the worst I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen a few. I couldn't agree more, Terry. I'm 70 in a minute. The mother-in-law's listening. Interesting. Jan's listening. Had a shave yet? Just a joke, 5:30. Just a joke, just a joke. They say, look at your mother-in-law and that's what your wife becomes. My mother-in-law is 3'2" with a beard. She was like Yoda in her anorak. Got to go home now. Honestly, I'm not joking. She doesn't really. She's not that tall. Andy Linton, Jez, well, here was I thinking that the illegal immigration crisis was caused by slack borders, ineffectual governments, over-generous benefits and wet lefty civil servants handing out citizenship like confetti. But no, I was wrong. According to Labour, the government with a 176-seat majority, it's caused by good weather. In other words, it's caused by climate change. Brilliant. Jane, hello. What happens if Starmer takes us to war in the next couple of years? Would there be an election? It's a very interesting one. Hello to... oh, God. If the army is low in numbers, get 16 to 25-year-olds to do national service. There's way too many scummy little sods with knives and guns thinking they're all action men on the street. The only thing I'd say about this, don't think the British Army want them. 5:30. In broadcasting terms, my next guest, he doesn't ever believe this, but he's a hero of mine. This man wears television like a second skin. We're delighted to have him on. Former BBC television presenter, BBC. Adrian Mills, good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Oh, you're definitely horns today, Jeremy, without question.
But you see, I don't know what that means. See, I thought horns was somebody with an opinion, but apparently it's your BBC lot, you halo-ridden...
Don't start.
Listen, you've sold your soul. You won't be getting that. So we're describing this DEI training as they're sort of virtuous. We're Halo. We work for the NHS. We work for the BBC. We're concerned about everything that's good. And if you've got a different opinion, you're horny, in effect.
Wholesome, I think, is the better word. Look, you and I both know there is always two sides to everybody. There are those people that are aggressive, but I see horny as being rather aggressive, rather bullish, and maybe people don't want to confront them. And so, therefore, you're always going to get your own way. Whereas poor souls like me just sit back and allow you to get on with it.
Yeah, but listen, but poor souls like you have creamed a living us off poor taxpayers for years, paying the BBC. No, I'm joking. Listen, on a serious note, I know we probably have a different view of the BBC, but I think even in the time that we've been speaking, the world's changed. would you say, genuinely, and I know that talkTV puts its stall out, the BBC, for me, we can criticise the BBC because it's a state national broadcaster, and in that very description, it should be, should it not, straight down the middle. And
yes,
would it be fair to say, I believe this, I'm interested in your opinion, that a lot of the coverage from the BBC has a bias that perhaps this station wouldn't recognise?
No, because you are polar opposites to a certain extent, and it's a perceived bias. Because I remember when I used to present the breakfast show for Radio London, BBC Radio London, and they called me in one day and they said, Adrian, we know you used to work for another broadcaster called LBC. We're the BBC. You have to be down the middle. You mustn't express your opinion. And that's why certain people that work for the BBC find it very, very difficult. I can think of a particular Newsnight presenter who's very opinionated, and he said, I was told off time and time again that actually, no, I want to hear your opinion, I want to hear your opinion, but I'm not allowed to give you mine, which I find slightly bizarre. Look, you know we do have a different view about this, and I constantly say to people, just look at what the BBC give you. Yes, there are problems. Yes, there are overpaid. Yes, there are probably too many members of staff. And as you rightly say, somebody that went in there could rip it apart and say, hang on a minute, where is this money going in this department? But you look at the David Attenborough programmes, you look at Match of the Day, you look at the sport, you look at the, EastEnders, the Play for Today's, all the radios. It actually, if you break it down, it is good value for money. And I don't necessarily believe anybody that says that they don't watch it or they've never dipped into it.
But the point is, and I guess it's years of commercial television and radio experience lead me to say this to you. And when I was a kid, there were 3 stations. There wasn't electricity. Sure. I'm 60 in a minute. But the truth of the matter is, there was much less choice. Now there is far more choice. There is streaming. It's all about clickbait. The world has changed. With that change, there are 2 arguments that I will put to you. Yes, I'm sorry, I think there is a bias, but you're saying that view is because of where we sit. I'll accept that to a degree. Although I think if you're the state broadcaster, you can't be you have to be what you said you would talk. But more than anything, I think there's a growing resentment, Adrian, amongst not only people in the same business, but actually the consumer, that they're still getting this money, right? Irrespective of what they produce, irrespective of what figures they create, irrespective of the... Christ, you did a show that would get 20 million viewers, That's Life, with the amazing Esther Rantzen. 20 million. People slag off, we've all heard, I interviewed him once, Michael Barrymore. Strike It Lucky, on a Wednesday night for half an hour, used to get 24 million. I can tell you categorically that the morning shows on ITV get no more than 600,000 viewers. Yeah. The world's changed. Does the BBC totally have a right to still be talking about £174.50 and even more when actually they don't get any of the impact there? I think that's what winds people up. I really do.
No, I think to a certain extent you're right there because, and you very kindly mentioned That's Life. Yes, on a regular basis, 20 million. If the BBC get an audience of 5 or 6 million for a programme, it's, pop the champagne corks.
Absolutely.
This is an absolute victory. But you're so right when you say, if you look at the sort of the groundwork of what has happened over the last 10, 20 years, BBC they always say they chase a young audience. These are the prospective viewers for the future. Yet those over 50s, I would suggest, are probably the audience they should be going after. And it is too convenient to sort of say, oh, well, we're trying to cater for everybody, because they don't. I really genuinely don't think they cater for everybody, because if you look at the daytime schedule, for example, what do you got? Homes Under the Hammer, Bargain Hunt, now in the 20th series, 20 years of. But that's very clever, because the BBC's charter, they have to show that, say, 25% of their programming is independent. So what you do is you stick a programme on 5 days a week, and that takes up an awful lot of your independent broadcasting. But the audience is different. My daughter doesn't sit and watch TV anymore. No. She streams stuff. She looks on a computer. She's on the phone. She's on YouTube. She's watching you. So that audience is dissipated.
Absolutely.
And the BBC are constantly trying to chase where should we go from here. But I do think, and I really genuinely mean it, and I'm not flag waving for the BBC, although it sounds like it, that actually be careful what you wish for, because I pay for a subscription for a TV. and I'm paying £1,000 a year.
Yeah, but there's a point here. That is choice. And the argument is, and in fact, talking to Ian Collins as we came on air, he said, do you get into those sort of Netflix dramas? And I'm always about a million years behind everybody else, but you start to talk about it and then you wife it and you sit down and I watch all 10, binge watch it, and I think it's amazing, and then I'm depressed when it's over. There isn't that drag from the BBC. The old style... I mean, you just made the point. If ITV has a drama that gets 3 or 4 million, British Got Talent was down 1 million this year. The whole industry is dissipating. That's a great word. And all I'm saying is with that, with massive choice, with different opinions, with the ability, like you said, your daughter, my daughter, they know stuff before I don't even know. People get their news and everything. Does the BBC morally then have a right, irrespective of what you think of their politics? Let's take that out. Does it have a right in this marketplace where everybody's scrapping to be talking about almost, what, 180 quid? People just won't pay it. And is it also fair the way they threaten people?
No, I don't think that the threatening of people is particularly fair, because I've had a couple of colleagues who have said, you'd never believe what I've just had, and they are people that were working for the BBC. But at the end of the day, are you not proud of a British broadcaster that wherever you go in the world, the name of the BBC carries such weight and influence?
Does it still, or is that the past?
Not to the same extent. No, not to the same extent. But I know with my travels that, you know, if you mention, you know, all sorts of things, as soon as you say the word BBC, there is a great sort of awe about who you have worked for. However, if you want to talk about saving money, start looking at the salaries of some of these individuals that are directors, and you suddenly realise...
Which is exactly the argument about, and I said it today, about the NHS and maybe the MOD and other, you know, reform, not wanting to bring you into politics, but they sent that Dode-style bunch of entrepreneurs into Kent County Council yesterday. They think they're going to save billions. Can you imagine if a government was elected that sent some people into the BBC? Because absolutely. The other point is, and I don't want to put... It's great to have a discussion with you because you were so balanced. I think the other reason that people are hacked off with the BBC, I think there's 3 reasons. I think people from a different political perspective see it as a bit left-wing. I think people think in this marketplace, with the way the world's changed, it's sort of unfair. And also, you know, how many catastrophic mistakes has the BBC made? How many... you know, I mean, for many, Hugh Edwards was the final nail in the coffin. For a man...
the Hugh Edwards story, they should be chasing him through the courts to claim back
the man's a convicted paedophile and is walking free. Let's not make it political. He's still getting a bloody pension. If you are a pensioner who's had your winter fuel cut and you're thinking, they want 174.50 or even more, and that man's getting some of that to have a pension, you're going to be hacked off about that big time, aren't you?
Well, there is the old argument when you talk about, say, BBC management that, oh, we have to pay the very high salaries to bring in the talent. And I go, no, do you know something? I don't necessarily believe that, because I think people would work for these companies at a much reduced salary, as a lot of the stars at the BBC had to do a few years ago by taking reductions. It never ceases to amaze me how people can actually achieve a salary of £1 million plus. And I go, really? I mean, it's just extraordinary. But at the end of the day, I genuinely believe that there is something there for everybody. Whether you justify it by saying it's 175 quid's worth is another matter. It will go up with inflation, probably by a fiver, 180 quid at the next one. But of course, the crunch is coming in another couple of years with the renewal of the charter. And in what direction will the BBC go? I fully suspect that they may well be thinking of a subscription of some description to take you forward with, say, perhaps politics or entertainment programmes, sport. Following, because it has to change. I think we're all aware that it has to change.
Absolutely love having you on. One of my broadcasting heroes. You're looking well. You're looking a bit dapper, me old son. Everything all right?
Can I tell you something? I was asked to audition the other day for the TV series The Rivals, you know, with Danny Dyer and people.
As what?
They wanted a 1980s newsreader. So I got the large flared jacket, I got the big tie, and I thought, in the 80s, I used to read the news. You weren't allowed to have a beard, so I shaved. I didn't get the job. So I'm now not even getting the jobs that I used to do. How bad is that?
You didn't get a job in Rive. This is terrible.
I know, it's appalling. And my wife she looked at me for about half an hour and she went, have you had some Botox? I went, no, Nikki, I've had to shave.
There's nothing wrong with Botox. I'll see you later.
Bye, Jeremy.
Thank you, Adrian Mills on Talk Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
6 Ian Collins, currently having dinner with my wife. 0344 499 1000. Sport before 6 o'clock, before the news to the phones quickly to Portsmouth. Kevin, you're on Talk Drive. Good evening, pal.
Good evening, Jeremy. How are you?
Not bad for a balding, slightly aged old man. How are you?
Well, I'm older than you and I'm feeling fine, but hey. The BBC. Everyone's sort of... I mean, I don't pay the BBC licence because I refuse to pay for something that I don't use. I still watch television. I'm quite happy to say that. I'll probably get the door kicked in now. But perhaps there ought to be a middle way, a compromise, whereby there is a very low licence fee, say 20, 30 quid a year, to cover the bits of the BBC that just aren't commercially viable.
Yep.
Like streaming the parliamentary channel and that sort of thing. Bits of the World Service. I'm not sure about the Asian service because that's been distinctly dodgy in recent years.
Adrian Mills just intimated, didn't he, that actually he believes that the next charter in 2 years that it will have to change and there will be a subscription. You try saying that base to some part of the licence fee, maybe.
I think it ought to be for most of it, and then, like I said, 20, 30, 40 quid a year to cover the stuff that nobody commercially would want to touch because it simply wouldn't be viable, like BBC Parliament and things like that.
Oh, come on, it's right. It's brilliant television, that, watching Parliament, isn't it? It's well worth the money.
Well, it is, but I mean, you get BBC Parliament, you get the House of Lords stuff like that. You've got to be really into it to want to sit and listen to that. But my point is that would never be viable. I wouldn't have thought from a commercial viewpoint.
Not that I can condone what you said about not paying your licence fee, but I appreciate your call. Thank you. Dave Clifford says the BBC is such a waste of money, Jez. I can honestly say I watch Question Time and that's it. So what value am I getting? I watch Talk TV, hell of a lot more, and it costs me nothing. What a load of old Botox. Thank you. Gary Hales. The only thing I watch on the BBC is the Six Nations. As a 50-plus person, it's not worth jack. Paul Jones says, if the BBC is that great, why isn't it a choice to pay for it instead of a tax? Julian says, don't get me started on the BBC, Jez. Cultural vandals. Look what they did to A Question of Sport and Doctor Who, to name but two of many. If they were managing a football team, they'd be non-bleeding league. Julie, matey from the BBC, just said he doesn't necessarily believe people who say they don't watch the BBC. Let me tell him how wrong he is. I don't watch it nor listen to any of its radio stations. Incidentally, neither do I watch ITV, Sky, Channel 4. Who wants to pay for left-wing propaganda crap? I haven't paid the BBC tax for 5 years. I'm not proud of the BBC. Talk radio for me. Did we pay her to say that? Good girl. Or a lady, I don't know. Carolyn, or Line. Tim Davey obviously would not believe me when I say I don't watch the BBC. I don't watch any of the programmes he listed, and I resent paying the licence fee. That is a fact. Rich says, please tell Adrian I cancelled my licence and unplugged my aerial the day Edwards walked. I emailed them and told them, welcome to call round to check I'm not watching any time and explain why I have to pay for pedos' pensions. No sign of them in 12 months. Don't need live TV. Thank you, Carl. In Cornwall. We'll do that in a minute. 0344 499 1000. 30 minutes to 6. We'll go to, I can't even see it, Birmingham, mate. Alex, all right? All right,
I'm not sure about that accent. Yeah,
where are you from, Alex, in Birmingham, mate?
I'm from Harborne in Birmingham. We don't speak like that, Jeremy.
Harborne? Harborne? I spent 15 years in Birmingham. If there was an earthquake in Harborne, it'd do £1 million worth of improvements. I'm joking. Not at all. It's a lovely place. Are you well, my friend?
I'm good, thank you. I just was getting hot under the collar when I heard Adrian say that it was such great value for the BBC. And if it was, it would evoke us to pay by choice. But I can't believe we live in times where it is a criminal offence not to, pay to have this somewhere in the background of your life, even if you're not watching it. They generate about 2.8 billion. Yeah. And look at what they do with that money. They pay, footballers to say all the left-wing nonsense, and they continually pay paedophiles. They get it wrong all the way down the line, and somehow or another they can still use that money they generate from our licence fee to actually send people out to snoop at your house to see if you're watching the TV, and then take you to court and have the law on their side and fine you £1,000. How can that be right in 2025?
I have to tell you, I agree with absolutely everything you've said, and you are also the poshest person I've ever spoken to from Harborne. Do you get out the bath to have a wee?
No, we don't do that in Harborne, Jeremy.
Really great to have you on, my friend. Thank you, Alex in Birmingham, making a strong point about the BBC. 11 minutes to 6. Sports next on Talk Drive.
The most disturbing element of this, I think, is the fact that this man was attacked by a knife-wielding maniac who stabbed him, and then as he was on the floor, he was kicked by a passing delivery driver.
Yeah.
Those two individuals have not yet faced trial. I know they will do. But as yet, this one's been very much rushed through. Apparently the words are the more frightening thing. But even worse than that, the judge in this case said, we know that your protest was disorderly and likely to stir disordered behaviour because you were attacked twice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is a point where we're told that you have to promote a competition. I'm going to do this as professionally as possible. We're giving you a fantastic chance, ladies and gentlemen. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets. Thank you to our friends at DAZN, because I get down and dirty with my friends at DAZN. Here, by the way, voiced by a broadcasting titan, Andy Goldstein, is everything you need to know.
Hello. Look who it is, it's me, Andy Goldstein. And here at TalkSport, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We're going to sort out the flights, we're going to sort out the accommodation, and we're going to give you £5,000 spending money to spend however you want. How about that?
18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. For a chance to win, all you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338. Do that by the 13th of June at 11 p.m, and that's it, you're done. You're in the draw. A text will cost £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have bill payer's permission. Or you can just send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, and it must arrive by 5 p.m. on the 18th of June.
This is a TalkSport limited competition run on TalkSport Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Get involved, my friends. Fantastic chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets. And thank you to Andy Goldstein, proving once again that quality traverses every part of his body. It's 6 minutes to 6. Next is the sport. Push the button.
Sport Summary on Talk.
My next guest, I always say I got him his first gig. I'm going to change that. I feel that you're better than Andy Goldstein. You should have been voicing that commercially in Danta. Good evening.
Well, maybe I'm...
God, where are you? On the way to rehab? What's the matter with you, man? Where are you?
I'm in a car park. What's the problem?
Why are you sitting in a car park with your dark glasses on at 6 o'clock at night? I've told you about this. This isn't right.
I'm about to play my drums, if you must know.
359 5599 gets you through to me. That's a personal joke between me and Danta from many years ago. I just had a bloke on from Harborne. He said he didn't get out of the bath to have a wee. Posh there. Thanks for coming on, pal. Loads to talk about. Well, the big story is, well, there's 2 stories. Manchester United captain Bruno Fernandes, who is his hate figure, but has actually been probably the greatest player for Manchester United over the last 2 seasons, turned down an unbelievable amount of money to go to the Saudi Arabia League, Al Hilal, 750 grand a week. Sort of begrudgingly, fair play to him.
Well, look, he obviously feels that he's better served being a Premier League player. Manchester United definitely weren't trying to get rid of him, so it was down to him as to whether he wanted to take the plunge and go to Saudi Arabia and their pro league. So I've seen a lot of Manchester United fans in a bit of a quandary about this, Jez. You know, some people think, well, we could have done with the money that we would have received from his sale, which they reckon was £100 million, that they could have reinvested in the squad. But when you look at his numbers since 2020 when he came in, he's on 98 goals, 80-odd assists from 290-odd games. He's been superb for Manchester United. He's probably one of the few bright spots in what's been such a dull season. They've already brought in Cunha from Wolves, looks like Burma, maybe next from Brentford. So if they start to get players in that can play with Bruno Fernandes, then perhaps there might be a few more smiles on faces of Manchester United fans next season. But look, I at least he gave it some thought, Jez. He didn't just say, yes, I'm going, or no, I'm staying. he thought with his family and then decided, no, I would rather stay.
I wouldn't be turning down the money. I'd go and play on my own. Chelsea, what for Jadon Sancho next? Chelsea pass on signing him. They've got to pay a fee of £5 million back to Manchester United. In essence, what happens to this man's career? Where's he going to end up? At bloody West Ham at this rate?
Well, you wouldn't turn him down if you could get the wages, but that's the problem. And that's the problem with a lot of these Manchester United players that have been farmed out on loan, Jadon Sancho and Marcus Rashford being the obvious two, in that their wages that they're currently on really preclude them from moving to so many clubs who just wouldn't be able to afford what they're on. So, yeah, it's nice work if you can get it for Chelsea to get £5 million to hand him back to Manchester United. That's a decent bit of work done by Chelsea. I don't know where Sancho goes next, Jez. He came from Borussia Dortmund. He'd been such a bright spark there. He'd, got himself into the England squad. Boy, has he gone backwards. And he's not the first to do that at Manchester United, and he probably won't be the last in the way that the club is currently. But I don't know how many suitors could genuinely afford him at this point.
Well, we did. I have to say, we did it with, what's the other one's name who went to West Ham? Jesse Lingard. Maybe we should take Jadon Sancho. Listen, this is ridiculous. England to train in tents to replicate the World Cup heat.
If you remember USA 94, because you're old enough to remember that, don't kid anybody.
This reminds me of the time that I went into a sauna and took all my clothes off, and when the steam went, I was in a fish and chip shop. It's an absolute nightmare.
Yes, that one of many confessions. USA 94 was characterised by a lot of hot weather in the United States. Now, it's Canada and Mexico as well.
Yeah.
But I think that they reckon a lot of the venues are going to have very high levels of heat. I think we're definitely going to see mandatory drinks breaks at these World Cup matches.
Could I respectfully suggest that rather than training in tents to replicate World Cup heat, they learn how to score a goal or save a penalty or get a penalty or win a match?
That's all well and good to say, but you and I have never played in these conditions of 30-plus degrees, and I think it saps your energy so quickly. Then, if they're out in Girona at the moment preparing for this World Cup qualifier against Andorra live on talkSPORT on Saturday night,
I like the way you did that.
If marginal gains, Jez, we can laugh at it and we can say it's a bit of a joke and a bit of a gimmick, but what are international sides looking for?
Yep.
Marginal gains.
Yep.
If training intense and getting a sweat on and actually learning to play in humid and close and sticky conditions benefits the side in the long run, I don't see an issue with it.
You are an expert at football. We only have 30 seconds. Sam, who pushes the buttons in a particularly impressive way, is a Charlton Athletic fan, delighted to be back in the Championship. Ryan has steadfastly supported the pathetic Watford for many, many years. In your opinion, please get this right. Who finishes higher next season in the Championship, Charlton Athletic or Watford?
Well, it should be Watford, because they shouldn't have been as low as they were this season. A lot of their players let Tom Cleverley down badly when he lost his job. Watford are one of several sides who should
10
be
seconds.
doing so much
Watford or go on, Charlton or Watford.
Watford. Look, Charlton have got to acclimatise.
Get off, man. Charlton are going to be the men. Newsnet.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, just gone 6 o'clock. I've just flicked the machinery and a button's flown across the studio. That was hugely exciting. Welcome to Drive, final hour for Tuesday. Across the UK, the home of free speech and common sense, JK till 7, merely warming you up for Kev O'Sullivan. But if you want to be part of the debate between now and then, 0344 499 1000 is the telephone number. Text to 87222. Do please start your message with the word talk. What we try and do is we try and give a cross-section of people's views on this station, because at the end of the day, it's about common sense. It's also about free speech. We spoke yesterday to Zia Youssef, chairman of Reform. At the beginning of the show, we spoke to Mark Francois, the shadow defence minister. I'm delighted to be joined now by Alistair Cairns MP, Minister for Veterans and Labour for Birmingham, Selly Oak. Al, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having us on the show, Jeremy.
Claire Short's old constituency.
No, different one, but Selly Oak in Birmingham.
Oh, yeah, well,
that might have been before.
I thought that's where she was, Selly Oak. You see,
well, Steve McCabe. I took over from Steve McCabe.
Before that, you see, Al, you're too young, mate. I'm very, very old. Welcome to the show. So, Minister for Veterans, part of the Defence Department, and obviously, Defence has been at the forefront over the last 24 and 48 hours. And one thing I want to start by saying to you is, I have been very vocal in my criticism of how defence spending has been cut over the last 20 years. And I aim that entirely at 14 years of Tory rule. I think it was an easy target. And the one thing that I'm delighted to say is that finally we seem to be switched on to the fact that we need to defend this country. However, yesterday's strategic defence review announcement went down in many quarters not brilliantly. Earlier, the shadow Tory Defence Minister Mark Francois on this show, furious, and he and his boss James Cartledge doing lots of work behind the scenes, how this was handled yesterday. I'd love your quote on this. We'll just have a look, because this is what he said happened before MPs had a chance to see this. Have a listen, have a watch.
They gave this document to selected journalists over the weekend. I mean, you could have read half of this in the Sunday Times. So this is before any MPs have got a chance to read it. Then, on the day, they invited, I've seen the email now, a bunch of journalists to a reading room in Horse Guards, and it says there'll be refreshments and very good Wi-Fi, you know, will make you very welcome, so that they could read through this hours before any Member of Parliament got it. By the time we got it, we didn't have time to read it before the statement. We were informed that a number of defence companies were given this, some of them at 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm not alleging on your programme, or indeed anywhere else, that people working for those contractors were involved in insider trading. That's not my point. But we don't know who got it.
Al Cairns, Veterans Minister, was this intentional or a mistake by your government?
Yeah, so I spoke to the team yesterday just to get the detail of this. I was actually sat in Parliament when this row erupted about the release of information and being in line with parliamentary protocol. And my team's informed me that the opposition party got this 1 hour before the speech itself, which was in line with political protocol.
But it was in the Sunday papers. You're not denying that fact. And there were businesses, and I know that James Cartledge has sort of raised another question. And actually, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, who's been quite vocal on not only this, but in the last 3 years, while I've been sat here, very, very strident against the Tory government, and you lot were behind that, saying, hold on a second, you need to come to Parliament. The whole point about elected MPs is that they're supposed to see this stuff first. They're surely, I mean, you have to admit, for something that important, it wasn't the greatest look yesterday.
Jeremy, I agree, and the Speaker has been very vocal on this. To get to a level of sophistication on the announcement within the SDR, we've got to engage with a whole plethora of people to work up the plans and the sort of policies to push forward. So bits of this in isolation would have been out there already. It was really unfortunate that some of it came out in the papers. What I would say is, that this isn't a conspiracy theory. There was an hour reading time to the opposition spokespeople before the speech itself. It's unfortunate. It sort of tainted some of the really good stuff within the strategic defence review.
I think that's the point that I'm trying to make. There must be a degree of regret from you and the department that this important strategic announcement has been overshadowed by, at best, slightly chaotic scenes. I think that would be fair.
So, Jeremy, I think in some cases that could be correct. There's also a bit where people will overplay this to undermine the SDR for political purposes.
I guess that's the point of opposition, and I suspect that you lot would have done exactly the same for 14 years. I'm just being straight.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the facts. Yesterday, Keir Starmer said 2.7% of GDP, 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2027. Then he was a little bit flaky about 3% by 2034. Today we wake up to the knowledge that NATO allegedly will force Britain to spend 3.5% of GDP on defence by 32, irrespective of what the government says. The Hague, later this month, NATO countries will commit to a new target, Al, of 3.5% plus an additional 1.5% on defence-related infrastructure by 2032. I said earlier to Mark Francois, I'll say to you, that's a direct result of Donald Trump, isn't it? Saying to NATO, hold on a minute, you can pay your way. I've been spending too much for a long time. If NATO are going to force you to 3.5%, why did your Prime Minister yesterday stand up and say, I'm going to go 2.5%? I don't understand that.
So I'd say let's have a look at the record. We've come into government, you mentioned at the start of the programme, this year alone we spent $5 billion more on defence. In 27, 2 to 3 years earlier than expected, we're going to move to 2.5%. That's 13 billion extra. And we said, we're 100% confident we're going to move to 3% in the next Parliament. Interestingly, the strategic defence reviewers have said how they've profiled the capability spend that can flex both ways, both up and down. So if the situation is to change geopolitically, threats were to increase, we find ourselves in an existential crisis, that strategic defence review can flex with the threat and the spending and requirement as required. We don't know at the moment what NATO is going to say. If they come out with 3.5%, that will require a whole nother discussion.
They can't force member countries, can they?
No, they absolutely can't. And your point about the US is a really interesting one. The US has to balance its strategic priorities, and there is a little bit about saying, Europe, it's time that you hold your own when it comes to your defence and security. And I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. And I think we've led the way at 2.5%. There's more to go. And the Strategic Defence Review also leads the way in some capability developments that the rest of Europe will jump on and support, and we'll support them as we move forward.
I mean, for me, I'm old enough to be slightly, in awe is the wrong phrase, slightly interesting to hear a Labour government talking about how important it is to defend. I was brought up watching Foot and Corbyn and all that, so it's good, it's great. And I think more than anything, and I made this point earlier, the fact that we're having this debate now is really important. And I think it's very rich from the Tory party, actually, if I'm being completely honest, who spent 14 years cutting defence because it was an easy target. However, again, because that's the job that I do, the head of the Institute for Fiscal Studies, Paul Johnston, said there will need to be chunky tax rises. The Tories left government, Al, with a 70-year high of tax. One of the very bedrocks of Toryism destroyed. That's why Reform are doing so well. But how are you going to pay for 2.5% and then latterly 3%? Because it is fair to say this country's skint. We can't even afford the interest on the money we owe. How are you going to raise money to make this country or put this country on a war footing? Because, our armed forces aren't ready to fight a war as we speak. It's going to take an awful lot of money. How are you going to raise that money?
So I would argue, you're right, it does take money, obviously, to equip our armed forces with the best kit and equipment. Part of this defence review has really been about an engine for growth. And I think we've cut the overseas development budget to spending taxpaying money overseas to really pump prime it into defence industry in the UK. For example, in the Strategic Defence Review, just the warhead programme and the nuclear submarine issue up to sort of 12 nuclear submarines will create 30,000 extra jobs. Now that you're you'll be right to point out that doesn't necessarily close the bracket. But at 2.57 is baked in, and the Prime Minister's been clear that he's 100% confident we'll move to 3% now in the next Parliament. Now, it'll be interesting to see what comes in the NATO summit, but we'll need to take that as it comes and work it out, when we have clarity from NATO.
I said it just then. I think it's great that we're suddenly talking tough. As a nation, about threats from, I've gone about this for years. There is a threat from Russia and China and Iran, that axis, and, the years of cutting have left, the most ridiculous situation. So I think that's good. But alongside that, as a voter, why is there not the same energy? Why is not the same conviction and effort put into dealing with the biggest crisis this country is facing, which is illegal immigration? Yesterday, somebody gave me a figure out. I'd love your response to this. Since 2018, your lot weren't in power, that's a fact. 150,000 illegal migrants have come into the United Kingdom. Illegal. Our armed forces are currently at 74,000. That's ridiculous. Ludicrous. I've heard you talk, your government, about stopping the boats. I've heard about Rwanda. I've heard everything. To me, it is an absolute disgrace that successive governments are not able to protect our borders when we're talking about increasing defence spending.
Yeah, so there's two things to say that. So you're absolutely correct. We live in an unprecedented geopolitical, dangerous time. In Ukraine for alone, by the time we've had this show since the start of the morning, it's probably been 1,000 casualties. Let that sink into the viewers. 1,000 casualties by halfway through the afternoon and 2,000 by the time we go to bed. That's a war of a scale we haven't seen since the Second World War. With illegal migration, I'll be absolutely clear, it must stop. The difficulty, and I've got a little bit of experience in this when I was in the military and we're asked to look at this problem set, is the complexity with how we go about that. And it's got to be, and I'll be really clear, Jeremy, it's got to be a multifaceted approach, but we've got to work on it as fast as feasibly possible. And I can tell you from within the centre of government and the different departments, they are working on a collaborative approach to provide this multifaceted sort of push, which ranges from diplomatic engagement with the French, for the French to do more, broader Europeans, smashing the gangs. We've got to move faster, and we've got to deliver the results for the nation, because, the passion, you mentioned it there, we absolutely recognise.
Can I, again, and if you've got time, I know you're a busy man, the thing is, I've heard this from so many people, and when you talk as I'm about to talk to you, people sometimes take it the wrong way. I don't mean it. I think that the United Kingdom has been and should be a place where we've always seemed to do the right thing, and that's for years, and that's great. Some people will say that we're still apologising for the colonialisation, but I'm just saying, but there comes a point, and we proved that with Ukraine, there comes a point in basic layman's terms, in my humble opinion, and I'd love yours on this, whereby the pull, we're so soft in this country, is so great that you will never ever again convince me that 1,000 young men who leave their wives and children in war-torn countries, allegedly, to come to the United Kingdom because they don't fancy a tent on a beach in France, they fancy this hotel and the mobile phone and whatever it gives them, right? That, to me, is the biggest deterrent, that we give these people too much. And the reason why Nigel Farage and Reform are galloping ahead in the polls is because he's talking to people in the United Kingdom, Al, who have paid their stamp for years and have gone, hold on a second, I'm 15th in the queue. That's not right. That's what governments or politicians need to understand. That's not far right. That's the British people saying, hold on a second, mate, we're being treated like mugs here.
Yeah, and I'll go back to my original point, Jeremy. We've got to stop illegal migration. There's a broader point, and I'm not soft on this issue at all, but it's a great credit to this country. So many people want to be here, but I get your point about perhaps we need individuals who are going to contribute to society, make this country great. And I think personally, Britain should be for British first, and then we look at everybody else as well. But you're right at the very start of your point. We said we are one of the most accepting countries. We've got to make sure people don't take advantage of it. And I'm completely with you on that, Jeremy.
Final question. I know you've got to go. As someone who has served, I'd love to ask you, are you happy with the government policy on making veterans face prosecution for their service? A petition against this policy has got over 130,000 signatures. Surely you can't support that.
So I'm 100% working to ensure veterans in no way, shape or form get hauled through the courts in Northern Ireland. And that's providing legal and welfare support, but more importantly, engaging with the Northern Ireland office to ensure we take into full consideration the age, the frailty, but importantly, the service these people were sent to Northern Ireland to protect the peace at a moment when we had the cusp of a civil war and there were explosions going on in every city of this country. I'm fully behind our veterans.
And actually, just to finish, as somebody who has served, and I think that puts you in a position where you have an understanding, and I rant a lot about this, and I bring it back to that migration thing. I think when I consider that people who have given their service, PTSD, many with injuries, and have been cast aside by society, many living homeless, but seemingly now even facing prosecution for doing a job to protect this country. I think it's an absolute disgrace, and I'm with you. I don't care what your political persuasion. Those are the people, yet another example, those are the people we should be defending, shouldn't we?
Hey, Jeremy, you're spot on. And I would say that this government, for the first time in history, probably since the First World War, we've launched Up Valour. And that's for the first time the government's taken responsibility for its veterans. It's a £50 million programme going to run out the next 3 years to provide wraparound care for our veterans, ensure our local governments are focused on veteran support, and also to build up data and understanding of our veterans, because at the moment it's quite disaggregated. That's the first time any government has taken responsibility above and beyond the third sector to deliver support for its veterans, other than piecemeal policies.
I'll tell you one thing, Al Cairns, I really appreciate you being on the show, and it's good that somebody from government comes on talk. Thank you so much indeed for your time. Al Cairns, Minister for Veterans and MP for Birmingham, Selly Oak there. He said it, did you hear that? It's about time this country put British first and other people second. 6:18, you were Talk Drive.
So yesterday, a man was found guilty of public order offences after he burned a Quran outside the Turkish embassy earlier in the year. And I think it's wrong to use the Public Order Act from 1986 in this way. It's a new thing, and we need to amend the law to make it absolutely clear that there is a right to criticise and protest peacefully and without inciting people against religious beliefs, and in particular Islam, which is where we have these problems emerging.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
people who watch this station and listen to this show know where politically I am. But actually, I have to say, credit where credit's due. Alistair Cairns MP, Minister for Veterans. It would be good if more in government for Labour came out and spoke as honestly and as decently as he did. 622 0344 499 1000. Jez, great show. Do we pay us that? This is really interesting. Is it Triffer? I don't know. Do you find it strange, or is it just me, that all the fish in the channel supposedly belong to the French, but all the bleeding migrants seemingly belong to the British? This is very, very true, isn't it? Yvette Cooper's at it again, says, Margaret, 12,000 migrants crossing the channel and this old... Yes, what a load of old codswallop. Yeah, it's the weather, Margaret. Honestly, that's all it is. It's the weather. Don't worry about it. 0344 499 1000. Let's head to Cambridge. Stephen, you're on Talk Drive. What you got, pal?
Hello, Jeremy.
Hello, mate.
Alistair Cairns, multifaceted approach. No, it's not. Labour have a majority. They could walk into Parliament tomorrow, call an emergency sitting and go, we're stopping it.
Listen, I don't understand. I mean, I said it to him and I'll say it to you, I'll say it to anybody. I don't understand. I remember watching the Trump inauguration and I remember thinking, hold on a second. I saw the inauguration and a week later, I say this almost every day on the show, I see a camera crew on the Mexican border with a family, with a woman crying. She's going, there's no point in trying to get in now. He won't let us. And I'm going, no, well, there you are. That's because that's what he said. It is extraordinarily ironic, as I said to him, that as we're talking about a strategic defence review and spending billions of pounds and updating all of the infrastructure of our army, we can't protect our bloody borders against men who are coming to this country, not because they're escaping war-torn countries, because they didn't bring their wives and kids with them, because they think it's a better life. That's the truth. And the big problem I've got with that is that it is a better life for them, but that's to the detriment of the British people, isn't it?
That's my point wholly. Why should our standard of living go down? I'm an old age pensioner, can't get the winter fuel allowance. So why should my standard of living go down because somebody wants to hop on a dinghy in France, jog their way across the channel? And by the way, why is the government allowing the RNLI and Border Force to go out and pick them up? They're not an immediate threat. They're you know, the boats ain't gone over. They ain't all bobbing about in the water.
You're telling me that the British Navy couldn't reverse those boats round and take them back to France in a heartbeat without any casualties? They could do the job completely, brilliantly and utterly fantastically, and it would send a very strong message, as it happened in Australia. I don't disagree. Stephen in Cambridge, thank you, 625. I was beginning to think my next guest had become so important. So important that he'd refused to talk to me, but he's just very, very busy. But we're delighted to have... Deputy Leader Richard Tice is on the show. Hello, Richard Tice. How are you?
Very good afternoon to you. It's good to see you back on the station. I wonder where you've been.
What is that wallpaper, Tice? You've changed.
Isn't it lovely?
It's bloody awful, man. Where are you? It looks like Christmas wrapping paper. What's going on?
Well, I'm in central London. Let's put it like that.
Lovely to speak to you, dear boy. It's been a while. I was beginning to get a bit of a conscience. Before you go anywhere, you might know an Isabel Oakeshott. She told me something about something I didn't know anything about, which is DEI and the NHS is the thing called Horne's halo bias. Do you know about this?
I don't know specifically about that. I know that DEI is an absolute nonsense. Diversity, equality and inclusion. It's costing us billions of pounds a year. And it's reducing performance all over the public sector, including in the NHS.
Apparently, woke sort of self-serving people say, we've got a halo, and anybody who's got an opinion that's against us is a horns thing. So there you are. I just thought I'd share that with you, because you might talk about it over dinner tonight. Mate, so much to talk about. I want to talk about something else before we talk about defence. I had Zia on yesterday, fascinating interview for half an hour, loads of response about this Doge-style attempt by Nathaniel Freed. He told us all about Nathaniel going in to Kent County Council and looking at wasteful spending, very much like Elon Musk. I said, wouldn't it be interesting if Reform got elected and they sent crack teams of people like Nathaniel Freed into the MOD, into the BBC, into Whitehall? There must be billions and billions of pounds, Richard Tice, being squandered at main government and local level that the British people need.
Well, what we're already discovering just a month into taking control of some of these councils is that there's tens of billions, Jeremy, being squandered just at the council level, literally. So at the national level, it could be many tens of billions, potentially hundreds of billions being wasted. And, you know, I talked about saving £5 in 100 and all the establishment said, no, dear chap, you can't do that. Impossible. I think I was being cautious. We're just lifting the bonnet on some of what's going on in these councils. And, I mean, some of it's a horror show.
How is it going to work, though, say in Kent? I said this to Zia, I'd like your opinion as well, when so much of the spending policies and caps are set by central government. How are you going to crack through this?
Because that's not the reality of the situation. You've got legal obligations to provide services, yes, but the ability, maybe we could provide the service for a cheaper price, but actually do it better because we're more efficient and we cut out the inefficiency, the daft regulations that hold back productivity. And so we actually do things for a lower cost and provide a better service. Just imagine that. Just imagine if we filled in more potholes per day at a lower price and a higher quality. Wouldn't that be a good thing? If you don't try things, you've got no chance of succeeding. So
you don't need to convince me, but I'll tell you somebody who you do need to convince, Richard Tice. Earlier, the Shadow Defence Minister, Marc Francois, personally attacked you and your Reform colleagues for... Well, just have a listen, have a watch.
We're a reform. This is legislation which is designed to enhance the welfare of our armed forces and their families. Why aren't they here? Having checked in Hansard, Madam Deputy Speaker, they weren't here yesterday either. They took no part in either of the urgent questions and no part whatsoever in the statement on the very long debate that followed it. Why? Because Reform don't do defence. They are one club golfers with one single issue, but unfortunately the welfare of armed forces personnel and their families doesn't seem to be one of them.
Richard Tice, your response to that?
Oh, I think it's hysterical because let's remember, at the general election, who was the only political party that in our contract we said you had to increase spending on defence to 2.5% of GDP within 3 years? Who said within 6 years you've got to increase it to 3%? And you have to pay for it, cut daft, wasteful foreign aid spending. And guess what? The government have listened and learned and copied from Reform policy, so we're making progress. I'll tell you exactly where we were yesterday. We were in Scotland. I was talking to the oil and gas industry about how you scrap net stupid zero and you create wealth and prosperity in Scotland. We've got there's an important by-election in Scotland. So, we were absolutely flat to the boards doing other things. And so look, at the end of the day, we're 5 MPs. And guess what? We're polling in the lead about 15% ahead of the Tories. So with the greatest of respect to Mr. Francois, he's become a minor party. That is the reality. And they are disappearing down a plug hole. And people are polling and voting for Reform. And I think we'll do so in significant numbers in the future because we've got common sense policies and we just tell it as it is. So
I have never seen you so stroppy. Poke that old bear. Listen, you know me. I completely agree with you. I just have to put all sides. But there is a point here. I mean, let me take the defence thing still further. So yesterday, 2.5%, exactly what it said in the Reform contract. I absolutely agree with you, Richard. 3% it became a bit flaky about, right? We're not quite sure about a day. Today, we discovered that NATO could well force Britain into spending 3.5% of GDP. At a summit in The Hague later this month, NATO countries will allegedly commit to 3.5% plus an additional 1.5% on defence-related infrastructure by 2032, which completely blows apart everything he said yesterday. Now, one of the big criticisms of the Labour Party, I just had Al Cairns on, who, I thought was good. I genuinely mean that hand on heart. But Starmer and his lot, I struggle a little bit. I struggle a lot. I always feel that with Starmer, he responds to what a focus group or what the latest thing seems to be that's garnering interest amongst people. Is he committed to defending this nation, or is this just the latest thing that needs talking about? Because, I mean, frighteningly yesterday in that defence review, not only are we not ready for war, right, but the only way this can be afforded, Richard Tice, is by raising taxes. So I know this is a curveball, but you wrote in your contract, and I'm going to ask you, how would reform pay to increase what we need increasing to make this country safe?
Well, I just repeat the point. We're the only people who had that target in our manifesto. The only thing that Starmer is doing at the moment is he is focusing totally on reform, because he's written off the Tories, like most of the country, and he's terrified of the progress of reform. So everything he's doing is to try and counter us. And yes, I mean, it's quite possible in a dangerous world that 3% of GDP spending on defence turns out in a few years' time not to be enough. But here's the point. Firstly, you've got to spend your money wisely and properly. And secondly, I would ask Monsieur Francois and his Conservative colleagues, why did we need a strategic defence review? Why have we got the lowest number of troops since in our lifetime? And the answer is because the Tories have been in charge for 14 years. They've completely and utterly screwed it up. They've left us defenceless as they've been playing their ridiculous power games, and the country will never forgive and never forget. And, you know, with the all credit to the Labour Party, the last time we were spending 2.5% on GDP on spending was under a Labour government. And look, I do think there are some people, credit where credit's due, within the ministry, within the Labour government's defence team who are very experienced and they're very committed to it. They've got to convince their Treasury, but the way to pay for it is to cut daft, wasteful spending, which we're discovering at every single level, and that's what we're spending our time on. Because if we work out how we can save the money, then guess what? We can invest ever more in sensible spending on important things like defence and like growing our economy. That is how we are spending our time. That's in the British national interest.
You know me, I have a job to do. Who's the reform, who speaks spokesperson for defence then, or is it just a general thing? Do you have one?
Well, it's across the piece between all of us, but primarily it's Nigel and myself. We've got a lot of experience in understanding, actually how you raise money to pay for things.
Yeah.
And we've got lots of people bringing in advice, but at the end of the day, that advice feeds in through us into the House of Commons and what we say on the media like today.
I thought the irony of yesterday, pal, was that as we announced it, they announced this strategic defence review, to spend 15 billion on warheads and drones and to create an army that can defend the United Kingdom. Our borders are that screwed. 50,000 this year, and yet Mrs. Balls today, Yvette Cooper, says it's the weather. I mean, that's what we genuinely have got to. Now, reform, riding high in the polls, gets attacked on a daily basis by the other parties saying that's just words. I read something today, a Labour MP said, that's all they talk about. And I literally shouted at the television, went, yes, because that's what people are about, because that's what people are annoyed about. They're annoyed because their own lives are being impacted, whether it's veterans, whether it's people waiting for a hip operation or to go to the dentist. They see these people having a better treatment, in effect, than they've done. And I think, and this is what I wanted to ask you, this feeds in, I think, to the whole reform pull, for me personally, is finally, it seems, that the small person, and that sounds really condescending, Richard, but you know what I mean, is being listened to. And that's where I think so many politicians go wrong.
The bottom line, Jeremy, is that that Labour MP seems to forget that all everybody is talking about during the election campaign and currently is immigration. Yeah. That is their primary concern, both the quantity of legal and illegal. And they're furious that, first of all, the Tories talked about stopping the boats and then failed. And then the Labour Party talked about smashing the gangs, and all they've done is encourage the gangs. So they've failed. And we're sending ever more hundreds of millions of pounds of taxpayers' cash to the French, who are giving photography lessons to their gendarmerie as they're laughing at our stupidity and waving goodbye to the boats as they send them.
Did you see that
to
today,
the
by the way?
Kingdom.
Did you see that today, by the way? When Mrs. Bowles blamed the weather, and this is from the Home Office, this is ironic as well. The figures also showed that migrant arrivals, I wanted to put this to you, and reform, were far lower when Conservative ministers were poised, underlined, to finally launch Rwanda removal flights last year. One of my big criticisms about the Tories at the time was they delayed, and didn't get on with it, because we've now got a government that's saying we should process in another country or offshore. What would you guys do if you got elected? You'd turn the boats round, you'd send the British Navy in, what would you do?
Yeah, look, we've got to leave the ECHR and we've got to safely pick up and take back. We're legally entitled to do it under the UN Convention of the Law at Sea 1982 International Treaty. And I've been talking about this for a couple of years, and it's quite funny that both the Tories and the Labour in government, they can't come back at me. And the truth is, A, they haven't read the treaty, B, if they did read it, they probably wouldn't understand it, but C, the embarrassing thing for them is Tice is right. And that gives them a real problem because they can't admit that we've got the right answer, because what it requires is political courage and leadership. And we're not seeing any of that from the previous Tory regime and from this current socialist regime. That is the bottom line. I'll repeat the point here. Here's a key point. Under that same treaty, the French have a legal obligation to pick the boats out of the water, the people out of the water, and take them back to France, which is what the Belgians have done. They've complied with their legal responsibility. Also, those people leaving the French shores are in breach of French domestic law, which I've also happened to have read. But once again, the French, they don't want these people, so they're ignoring those breaches and just waving them off from the beaches. Look, we've dug into this stuff. We know what needs to be done, but all of it, like many things in life, requires strong, robust leadership.
Let's talk about strong, robust leadership, Richard. Tice is right. Actually, you have changed, mate. Will you still talk to me when you're in government, do you think?
I've always loved talking to you, Jeremy.
Mate, let's talk about robust things. This is something I really wanted to get into briefly. 4 years out, I mean, even by your standards, and you set reform up, and it's extraordinary momentum. It's vibe, it's the language, it seems, of the nation. I know that this station is sort of centre-right, or to the right of centre, and would be supportive of those sorts of things. But reform is sort of, I mean, it's cataclysmic, what's happened. It's huge. And the response and the growth in the polls. 4 years out, though, I watched an interview with Nigel in Scotland, and some inane journalist decided to, basically called him a racist. And Nigel bit back. Does reform, I think lots of people want to know this, do you have the strength of a Trump to take everything that's going to be thrown at you? Morally, legally, the newspapers, whatever. Everybody's going to shout and scream. The establishment, the blob, the BBC, they are going to stamp their bleeding feet. Are reforms strong enough to kick back because they believe that this country genuinely needs a reform government?
Well, given that I suspect in the House of Commons that there's nobody apart from, the two people who've received the most abuse and vitriol is number one, Nigel, and probably number two, myself, over the last, 5 years.
When you say vitriol, what do you mean? What do you mean vitriol? What do you mean vitriol?
At the end of the day, we're stronger and tougher. And yes, no one's saying it's easy. It shouldn't be easy, given what we're trying to do. We should be subject to scrutiny. But here's the thing. Now that we're running 10 councils, our job is to perform and deliver. And it'll take some time. We'll keep people updated. Good, top media folk like your good self will scrutinise and hold us to account. And that's all part of the process. And we're not afraid of that. We'll get lots right. We'll get some things wrong. And we'll be honest about that. But yeah, look, they will throw everything at us. But let me tell you this. When I get stopped on the street every single day, the most common theme I hear from people is, keep battling on. And that's what we're going to do. And we're not afraid. And we will just keep battling on. And let's see where things turn out.
Final thing, and really good, and it'd be really interesting to see, because it is, and I suspect if you were honest, the momentum is a lot quicker than you would have believed it could be. 4 years out to be hitting that 30%. Somebody said to me yesterday, you're heading for 350 seats. I personally, this is my opinion, not this station's, think that the British people have finally gone, do you know what? We've had 50 years of this, A to B, B to A to B, and you know what? These people might not be professional politicians, whatever a professional politician is. These people have businesses, they've had success, they're speaking our language, they deserve a turn. And if they mess it up, right? But I am convinced, Richard Tice, that conviction politicians are what this country needs. People, and you just said it, who would stand up and go, do you know what? We might make mistakes. It's going to be a journey. I'll take you with me. There'll be good days and bad days. We'll get things right. We'll get things wrong. But this is for you. This is what you voted for. And trust me, If you vote for me, I will do that. End of. Done. That's it. Honesty with people.
But here's the reality. For the last 20 years, we've had these so-called professional politicians, many of whom did, philosophy, politics and economics at somewhere like Oxford or Cambridge. And that's all very la-di-da, jolly nice too. Where's that led the country? That's led the country to the broken state we're in. It's almost bankrupt and nothing works. So maybe actually we don't want professional politicians. Maybe we do want people who've been around the block, run things, done things, got a track record of success, and then saying, right, we're going to come and save the country. And that's where we're at. And that's why what is really exciting is the quantity of great people who are coming to us saying, can I help? Can I stand? Can I get involved? Either frontline or back office. And that's because they recognise that we tell it as it is, and people want to get stuck in and feel that they can make a difference. You're right, the momentum is very significant, but that's because the country's in such a state. And if we don't change course rapidly, we are heading towards serious financial trouble. And we've got to turn that round.
Mate, it's great, and I really appreciate the time. Not keen on the wallpaper, but the new haircut does wonders for you. Dinner soon, I promise. Thank you very much indeed. 17 minutes to 7. This is Talk Drive.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
7:15, Julia from Tampa. Mike Graham is back, 6 o'clock in the morning. The only way to wake up Mike Graham's morning glory. He's up and at it early. John Lucas is here again. How are you, sir? The night's news editor from The Sun. You laughed yesterday when I did the Mike Graham joke, and today you didn't. That's how repetitively boring I am. Mike Graham in the morning, Julia from 10. Kevin a minute, by the way, and Millie is fluffer. John, just looking at the newspaper today. Read that stuff, by the way, Madeleine McCann. Fascinating. Migrants tomorrow. I mean, this is interesting. You've been to Dunkirk, haven't you, the team?
Yeah, we're back over there. So this is something we've done several times over the last few years. We never fail to sort of pick up stories over there. And, you know, it's a mix of the harrowing tales that the migrants have got and sort of the what we witness, which we think is going wrong over there. So we've got these figures out today that show a massive increase in the number of these boats carrying more than 80 people. So that's tripled in a year. And what that means is that these ruthless smuggling gangs are trying to cram more and more people onto these boats. Obviously, you know, from our point of view and the point of view of a lot of your listeners, one of the big effects of that is more and more people are turning up in a shorter space of time. So we've had about 14,000 this year. So that's the biggest. I think that's the biggest 5-month total we've ever had. Obviously, you're getting towards the point of it being a small town, but also on the human cost of that, it's incredibly dangerous for these people being
No, it is,
crammed on there.
of course, and that's fine, and you can talk, as the Labour Party do, about let's smash the gangs, which they haven't done. The fact is, you know, it needs somebody to be hard, and it's not for us to discuss politics, but you know, how do these people afford to pay these people smugglers if they're so skint they need to come to Great Britain? The fact of the matter is, and this is just my opinion, I don't know whether the Sun share it, we can talk about deterrence. The biggest deterrent that the government this country should do is to make it, it's not even about coming over. Stop making it so bloody attractive when you get here, because at the same time you're screwing the many people, the millions of people who read the Sun newspaper, who watch and listen to talkTV and Talk Radio, who have paid their stamp, John, and are being left at the back of the queue. That's why people are hacked off. It's simple.
Absolutely. And the other part of the row that's sort of bubbling away today is this thing about red days. So this is where the wind speeds are perfect, the water's perfect, all the rest of it, and the government's saying, well, look, we've had a hell of a lot of these days, and it's really predictable. We know that's why so many people are coming over. And
that's all we've got from Mrs. Balls today, is it's because of the weather. I mean, great, isn't it?
Yeah, well, and the Tories point out, well, look, you know, you're just blaming the weather here. We had a great deterrent scheme in Rwanda, which you've scrapped, haven't really got an alternative to that. And what we're going to be asking tomorrow in our leader column is, you know, if it's all so predictable, why can't the French take more action at this point? Why can't we get out there in the channel? An argument,
not an argument with you. Well, they won't, because we're giving them 500 million quid to do sod all, because they're not. The reason people come is because they don't want to be in a tent in France. Honestly, check the Sun tomorrow. It's going to be brilliant. That migrant crisis. Now, I used to live near Windsor Castle.
Yeah.
I lived there many, many years. A security scare, a drug-crazed intruder, this isn't me, broke into Windsor Castle.
Yeah, and it's not the first time we've had security scares there. So we managed to break this story this afternoon.
Yep.
It's a combo of our crime editor Mike Sullivan and our royal editor Matt Wilkinson picked up on this story. So this happened at the weekend. It was on Sunday.
Yeah.
This chap, we think he managed to get over a 10-foot wall. Not quite sure how he's managed to do this.
Drug crazy just bounced.
Yeah, he may well have done. He was that high.
He was that high. He just bounced over the thing.
Exactly. And well, we reported last year they removed the armed police from outside the castle. So obviously they're still patrolling inside. But whether that, you know, lack of deterrent has sort of encouraged somebody to do it.
I can say as somebody, and I know that the Prince and Princess of Wales were understood to be staying at Adelaide Cottage with the kids on Sunday. I can say from somebody who lived there, and it's really weird because I lived on the Long Walk for 7 years. It's really strange. When the Queen, after the Queen died, Windsor changed immeasurably. There was less security, there was less visitors. And I suspect that might be one of the reasons I'm not saying it's lax, but I don't think there were the systems or perhaps the activity that there was before. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the police inside obviously sprung into action. They grabbed this guy. He's been arrested on suspicion of trespass, possession of Class A drugs. William and Kate's team obviously were alerted at this point. Hasn't been charged yet, so we don't know all the details about it, but that will happen probably over the next couple of days, and we'll follow it up in court and we'll find out what it's all about.
2 minutes left. We have to do this one because I loathe her with a passion. Meghan Markle has admitted her As Ever food brand.
Yes.
It might be annoying to customers after she paused a planned restock. The Duchess of Sussex's new firm will wait until it's completely stable before releasing a new line of jams, cookie mixes and herbal tea. She claims she'd shed many tears building the company, which was forced to change its name from American Riviera Orchard over a trademark spat. She's admitted might be annoying to customers. Well, no, she's annoying to everybody.
Funnily enough, she's admitted being annoying, but not for the reason people would actually... What she actually thinks is that it's going to annoy people because she went out of stock too quickly.
Yeah.
And people love it
Jenny
too
made
much.
10 pots of jam, man.
Well, £28 wildflower honey, £14 cookie mix, £12 herbal tea, and £14 crepe mix.
So she thinks people are hacked off because she's run out of product.
She's run out and she's had to...
No, love, seriously, it's because they don't like you. Has she still not sussed that out?
I don't... I mean, these things thrive on the celebrities being popular and having authenticity, don't they? So, you know, it speaks volumes.
I can never tell it in truth, but the first day I came here, your boss at The Sun asked me my opinion of that woman, and we both came out with exactly the same phrase. Finally, very quickly, former Step star Ian H. Watkins was forced to change the name of his music festival because it sounded like Coachella. What?
Yes. We all know him and love him. He's having a music festival in the Vale of Glamorgan, where he's from.
Yeah.
And he's got tribute acts for all the classics. He's got Harry Styles tribute, Venga Boys tribute.
Yeah.
It's going to be great fun. He wanted to call it Cowcella.
It's the hometown of Cowbridge in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Yeah,
Cowcella.
Exactly. Yeah, massive music festival in the US called Coachella.
Yeah.
That has 250,000 people rock up.
And they complain.
Lawyers came on to him. Yeah, he's had to change it. And he's now calling it the Moolah La Festival.
The what?
Moolah La.
Do you know, I love the Sun newspaper every day. Yesterday we had, was it flies on cocaine? And today we've got 8 steps, Moolah La. But most of all, ladies and gentlemen, go to bed tonight or whatever you're doing, remembering this. Meghan Markle understands that you might be annoyed that she's waiting to restock jams and cookie dough, whatever it is. No, the truth is she doesn't know that we all hate her. John, are you back tomorrow? Regular turn.
I don't know if I can, yeah.
John Lucas, News Night, editor of The Sun. Thank you very much indeed. Get tomorrow's paper. 8 minutes to 7. We're live across the UK. This is Talk Drive.
He suggested that Hamet's actions were an attack upon followers of religion, but in fact, he was not attacking Muslims. He was attacking the way in which Islam is being abused by the Turkish regime to crack down on human rights, and the way in which the Turkish regime is facilitating Islamist extremists who want to turn that country into a fully fledged Sharia law state.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A public service announcement for Cameron, boyfriend to Jodie, who works on the Jeremy Kyle show. I just showed Jodie a video of my young children, and she went, "Oh, that's so cute." I said, "It's not at 4 o'clock in the morning. Cameron, be careful." 5 to 7 to the phone lines. Diane's in Leicester. 1 minute only. Di, what you got me?
Right, a couple of things. First of all, Richard Tice, tell him to keep going because it's the British public that are supporting him, not the stupid government.
Quite right too. Absolutely agree with you. Go on.
Right, TV licensing.
Yes.
Right, this is my bugbear. If you want to take it as a subscription service, you can pay monthly for your TV licence, which currently is £14.54 a month.
Is it?
Yeah, which is more expensive than most of the services that you subscribe to, like Netflix or whatever.
Yep.
However, if you've never used them before, for the first 6 months, you have to pay them £29.10, and then it drops down to £14.54. So why am I paying for my TV licence 6 months in advance?
Listen, I have a very... I would never work for the BBC. I have a very strong view about how... I believe really, really strongly that in today's media world, right, there should be, in each and every way, you should have to justify your existence. And I think, you know, I'm not even bothered about whether they're left-wing or they but I'm not particularly keen that my licence fee is paid for that paedophile Hugh Edwards to still walk the streets paying for his pension. But my point is this, is the programming's not that great and it doesn't stack up against all the other stuff. So why are we forced to pay for that when we can make choices whether we want to watch the other stuff, which costs us money? Or you can just watch and listen to talk and it's free.
Well, you know, from my point of view, I very rarely watch TV now. However, my subscription goes to watching YouTube because I get to see all the things that I want to watch.
Like me.
As opposed, like you, obviously. Apart from, you know, having to watch a whole load. I mean, I'm a pensioner, so for the first 3/4 of a day on BBC television, there is absolutely nothing apart from repeat.
Oh, you can't be doing with daytime television, can you? You can't be watching daytime television. No.
I don't watch daytime television.
Daytime television, you wouldn't watch that, would you? No.
And then again, you know, even if you sort of said, OK, it's worth it for watching maybe just at Christmas.
I mean, it used to be worth watching daytime television, didn't it?
Well, yeah. Well, yes, it did, but that was a long time ago.
It was. Thanks very much. Lovely to speak to you. Thank you, Diane and Leicester. We love her very much. A man who used to actively write about daytime television and call me Jeremy Vile. Kev O'Sullivan, how are you?
Hello, Mr. Vile. Good to see you. I'm all right. I'm all right.
You look in the part. It's been very interesting. Did you know what halo and horn is, Bias?
No.
So this is DEI rubbish in the NHS, and they label people horns or halo. If you're a halo, you said, I work in the NHS, I'm fantastic. And if you've got an opinion, you disagree, you're horns and you're horrible. Isabel was telling us all about it. Fascinating.
I would say that I'm certainly one of the horns.
I think you're very horny. What you got? Hey!
Rod Little's coming on for the first half an hour. We're going to talk about the migrant crisis and other things.
It's the weather, Kev. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Rubbish,
it's the weather.
Rubbish. Interestingly, let me give you some of the interesting. We're going to do Alex Phillips. I'm going to do the story of Alex Phillips. She got baptised in the sea over the weekend.
Why?
Because she
wants to stay in the country.
Full-time Christian.
Has
you
she
know,
really?
So I want to talk
Isn't that
to
how
her
you
about
get
that.
to stay in the country?
Well, yeah. It was off the coast of Eastbourne, and we were half expecting like a boat full of migrants to come past.